This is Audible.
Divergent by Veronica Roth. Chapter 21. The door to the pit closes behind me, and I am alone. I have not walked this tunnel since the day of the choosing ceremony. I remember how I walked it then, my footsteps unsteady, searching for light. I walk it sure-footed now. I don't need light anymore. It has been 4 days since I spoke to Tori. Since then, Erudite has released 2 articles about abnegation. The first article accuses abnegation of withholding luxuries, like cars and fresh fruit, from the other factions in order to force their belief in self-denial on everyone else. When I read it, I thought of Will's sister, Kara, accusing my mother of hoarding goods. The second article discusses the failings of choosing government officials based on their faction, asking why only people who define themselves as selfless should be in government. It promotes a return to the democratically elected political systems of the past. It makes a lot of sense, which makes me suspect it is a call for revolution wrapped in the clothing of rationality. I reach the end of the tunnel. The net stretches across the gaping hole, just as it did when I last saw it. I climb the stairs to the wooden platform, where 4 pulled me to solid ground and grab the bar that the net is attached to. I would not have been able to lift my body up with just my arms when I first got here, but now I do it almost without thinking and roll into the center of the net. Above me are the empty buildings that stand at the edge of the hole, and the sky. It is dark blue and starless. There is no moon. The articles troubled me, but I had friends to cheer me up, and that is something. When the first one was released, Christina charmed one of the cooks in the Dauntless kitchens, and he let us try some cake batter. After the second article, Uriah and Marlene taught me a card game, and we played for 2 hours in the dining hall. Tonight, though, I want to be alone. More than that, I want to remember why I came here, and why I was so determined to stay here that I would jump off a building for it, even before I knew what being dauntless was. I work my fingers through the holes in the net beneath me. I wanted to be like the Dauntless I saw at school. I wanted to be loud and daring and free like them. But they were not members yet. They were just playing at being dauntless. And so was I, when I jumped off that roof. I didn't know what fear was. In the past 4 days, I faced 4 fears. In one I was tied to a stake, and Peter set a fire beneath my feet. In another, I was drowning again, this time in the middle of an ocean, as the water raged around me. In the third, I watched as my family slowly bled to death. And in the fourth, I was held at gunpoint and forced to shoot them. I know what fear is now. Wind rushes over the lip of the hole and washes over me, and I close my eyes. In my mind, I stand at the edge of the roof again. I undo the buttons of my gray abnegation shirt, exposing my arms, revealing more of my body than anyone else has ever seen. I ball the shirt up and hurl it at Peter's chest. I open my eyes. No, I was wrong. I didn't jump off the roof because I wanted to be like the Dauntless. I jumped off because I already was like them, and I wanted to show myself to them. I wanted to acknowledge a part of myself that abnegation demanded that I hide. I stretch my hands over my head and hook them in the net again. I reach with my toes as far as I can, taking up as much of the net as possible. The night sky is empty and silent, and for the first time in 4 days, so is my mind. I hold my head in my hands and breathe deeply. Today the simulation was the same as yesterday. Someone held me at gunpoint and ordered me to shoot my family. When I lift my head, I see that 4 is watching me. I know the simulation isn't real, I say. You don't have to explain it to me, he replies. You love your family. You don't want to shoot them. Not the most unreasonable thing in the world. And the simulation is the only time I get to see them, I say. Even though he says I don't, I feel like I have to explain why this fear is so difficult for me to face. I twist my fingers together and pull them apart. My nail beds are bitten raw. I've been chewing them as I sleep. I wake to bloody hands every morning. I miss them. You ever just miss your family? 4 looks down. No, he says eventually. I don't. But that's unusual. It is unusual. So unusual it distracts me from the memory of holding a gun to Caleb's chest. What was his family like that he no longer cares about them? I pause with my hand on the doorknob and look back at him. Are you like me? I ask him silently. Are you divergent? Even thinking the word feels dangerous. His eyes hold mine, and as the silent seconds pass, he looks less and less stern. I hear my heartbeat. I've been looking at him too long, but then he has been looking back, and I feel like we are both trying to say something the other can't hear, though I could be imagining it. Too long, and now even longer, my heart even louder, his tranquil eyes swallowing me whole. I push the door open and hurry down the hallway. I shouldn't be so easily distracted by him. I shouldn't be able to think of anything but initiation. The simulations should disturb me more. They should break my mind, as they have been doing to most of the other initiates. Drew doesn't sleep. He just stares at the wall, curled in a ball. Al screams every night from his nightmares and cries into his pillow. My nightmares and chewed fingernails pale by comparison. Al's screams wake me every time, and I stare at the springs above me and wonder what on earth is wrong with me, that I still feel strong when everyone else is breaking down. Is it being divergent that makes me steady, or is it something else? When I get back to the dormitory, I expect to find the same thing I found the day before. A few initiates lying on beds or staring at nothing. Instead, they stand in a group on the other end of the room. Eric is in front of them with a chalkboard in his hands, which is facing the other way, so I can't see what's written on it. I stand next to Will. What's going on? I whisper. I hope it isn't another article, because I'm not sure I can handle any more hostility directed at me. Rankings for Stage 2, he says. I thought there weren't any cuts after Stage 2, I hiss. There aren't. It's just a progress report, sort of. I nod. The sight of the board makes me feel uneasy, like something is swimming in my stomach. Eric lifts the board above his head and hangs it on the nail. When he steps aside, the room falls silent, and I crane my neck to see what it says. My name is in the first slot. Heads turn in my direction. I follow the list down. Christina and Will are 7th and 9th, respectively. Peter is 2nd, but when I look at the time listed by his name, I realize that the margin between us is conspicuously wide. Peter's average simulation time is 8 minutes. Mine is 2 minutes, 45 seconds. Nice job, Triss, Will says quietly. I nod, still staring at the board. I should be pleased that I am ranked first, but I know what that means. If Peter and his friends hated me before, they will despise me now. Now I am Edward. It could be my eye next. Or worse. I search for Al's name and find it in the last slot. The crowd of initiates breaks up slowly, leaving just me, Peter, Will, and Al standing there. I want to console Al, to tell him that the only reason that I'm doing well is that there's something different about my brain. Peter turns slowly, every limb infused with tension. A glare would have been less threatening than the look he gives me, a look of pure hatred. He walks toward his bunk, but at the last second, he whips around and shoves me against a wall, a hand on each of my shoulders. I will not be outranked by a stiff, he hisses, his face so close to mine I can smell his stale breath. How did you do it, huh? How the hell did you do it? He pulls me forward a few inches, and then slams me against the wall again. I clench my teeth to keep from crying out, though the pain from the impact went all the way down my spine. Will grabs Peter by his shirt collar and drags him away from me. Leave her alone, he says. Only a coward bullies a little girl. A little girl? Scoffs Peter, throwing off Will's hand. Are you blind, or just stupid? She's going to edge you out of the rankings and out of Dauntless, and you're going to get nothing, all because she knows how to manipulate people and you don't. So when you realize that she's out to ruin us all, you let me know. Peter storms out of the dormitory. Molly and Drew follow him, looks of disgust on their faces. Thanks, I say, nodding to Will. Is he right? Will asks quietly. Are you trying to manipulate us? How on earth would I do that? I scowl at him. I'm just doing the best I can, like anyone else. I don't know. He shrugs a little. By acting weak so we pity you? And then acting tough to psych us out? Psych you out? I repeat. I'm your friend. I wouldn't do that. He doesn't say anything. I can tell he doesn't believe me. Not quite. Don't be an idiot, Will, says Christina, hopping down from her bunk. She looks at me without sympathy and adds, She's not acting. Christina turns and leaves, without banging the door shut. Will follows. I am alone in the room with Al. The first and the last. Al has never looked small before, but he does now, with his shoulders slumped and his body collapsing on itself like crumpled paper. He sits down on the edge of his bed. Are you all right? I ask. Sure, he says. His face is bright red. I look away. Asking him was just a formality. Anyone with eyes could see that Al is not all right. It's not over, I say. You can improve your rank if you... My voice trails off when he looks up at me. I don't even know what I would say to him if I finished my sentence. There is no strategy for Stage 2. It reaches deep into the heart of who we are and tests whatever courage is there. See, he says. It's not that simple. I know it's not. I don't think you do, he says, shaking his head. His chin wobbles. For you it's easy. All of this is easy. That's not true. Yeah, it is. He closes his eyes. You aren't helping me by pretending it isn't. I'm not sure you can help me at all. I feel like I just walked into a downpour, and all my clothes are heavy with water, like I am heavy and awkward and useless. I don't know if he means that no one can help him, or if I, specifically, can't help him. But I would not be okay with either interpretation. I want to help him. I am powerless to do so. I start to say, meaning to apologize, but for what? For being more dauntless than he is? For not knowing what to say? The tears that have been gathering in his eyes spill over, wetting his cheeks. Want to be alone. I nod and turn away from him. Leaving him is not a good idea, but I can't stop myself. The door clicks into place behind me, and I keep walking. I walk past the drinking fountain and through the tunnels that seem endless the day I got here but now barely register in my mind. This is not the first time I have failed my family since I got here, but for some reason, it feels that way. Every other time I failed, I knew what to do, but chose not to do it. This time, I did not know what to do. Have I lost the ability to see what people need? Have I lost part of myself? I keep walking. I somehow find the hallway I sat in the day Edward left. I don't want to be alone, but I don't feel like I have much of a choice. I close my eyes and pay attention to the cold stone beneath me and breathe the musty underground air. Triss! Someone calls from the end of the hallway. Uriah jogs toward me. Behind him are Lynn and Marlene. Lynn is holding a muffin. Thought I would find you here. He crouches near my feet. I heard you got ranked first. So you just wanted to congratulate me? I smirk. Well, thanks. Someone should, he says. And I figured your friends might not be so congratulatory, since their ranks aren't as high. So quit moping and come with us. I'm going to shoot a muffin off Marlene's head. The idea is so ridiculous I can't stop myself from laughing. I get up and follow Uriah to the end of the hallway, where Marlene and Lynn are waiting. Lynn narrows her eyes at me, but Marlene grins. Why aren't you out celebrating? She asks. You're practically guaranteed a top 10 spot if you keep it up. She's too dauntless for the other transfers, Uriah says. And too abnegation to celebrate, remarks Lynn. I ignore her. Why are you shooting a muffin off Marlene's head? She bet me I couldn't aim well enough to hit a small object from 100 feet, Uriah explains. I bet her she didn't have the guts to stand there as I tried. It works out well, really. The training room where I first fired a gun is not far from my hidden hallway. We get there in under a minute, and Uriah flips on a light switch. It looks the same as the last time I was there. Targets on one end of the room, a table with guns on the other. They just keep these lying around? I ask. Yeah, but they aren't loaded. Uriah pulls up his shirt. There is a gun stuck under the waistband of his pants, right under a tattoo. I stare at the tattoo, trying to figure out what it is, but then he lets his shirt fall. Okay, he says. Go stand in front of a target. Marlene walks away, a skip in her step. You aren't seriously going to shoot at her, are you? I ask Uriah. It's not a real gun, says Lynn quietly. It's got plastic pellets in it. The worst it'll do is sting her face, maybe give her a welt. What do you think we are, stupid? Marlene stands in front of one of the targets and sets the muffin on her head. Uriah squints one eye as he aims the gun. Wait! Calls out Marlene. She breaks off a piece of the muffin and pops it in her mouth. Okay. She shouts the word garbled by food. She gives Uriah a thumbs up. I take it your ranks were good, I say to Lynn. She nods. Uriah's second. I'm first. Marlene's fourth. You're only first by a hair, says Uriah as he aims. He squeezes the trigger. The muffin falls off Marlene's head. She didn't even blink. We both win, she shouts. You miss your old faction? Lynn asks me. Sometimes, I say. It was calmer, not as exhausting. Marlene picks up the muffin from the ground and bites into it. Uriah shouts, Gross! Initiation's supposed to wear us down to who we really are. That's what Eric says anyway, Lynn says. She arches an eyebrow. Force says it's to prepare us. Well, they don't agree on much. I nod. Ford told me that Eric's vision for Dauntless is not what it's supposed to be, but I wish he would tell me exactly what he thinks the right vision is. I get glimpses of it every so often. The Dauntless cheering when I jumped off the building, the net of arms that caught me after ziplining, but they are not enough. Has he read the Dauntless Manifesto? Is that what he believes in? In ordinary acts of bravery? The door to the training room opens. Shauna, Zeke, and Four walk in just as Uriah fires at another target. The plastic pellet bounces off the center of the target and rolls along the ground. I thought I heard something in here, says Four. Turns out it's my idiot brother, says Zeke. You're not supposed to be in here after hours. Careful, or Four will tell Eric, and then you'll be as good as scalped. Uriah wrinkles his nose at his brother and puts the pellet gun away. Marlene crosses the room, taking bites of her muffin, and Four steps away from the door to let us file out. You wouldn't tell Eric, says Lynn, eyeing Four suspiciously. No, I wouldn't, he says. As I pass him, he rests his hand on the top of my back to usher me out, his palm pressing between my shoulder blades. I shiver. I hope he can't tell. The others walk down the hallway, Zeke and Uriah shoving each other. Marlene splitting her muffin with Shauna, Lynn marching in front. I start to follow them. Wait a second, Four says. I turn toward him, wondering which version of Four I'll see now. The one who scolds me, or the one who climbs Ferris wheels with me. He smiles a little, but the smile doesn't spread to his eyes, which look tense and worried. You belong here. You know that? He says. You belong with us. It'll be over soon, so just hold on, okay? He scratches behind his ear and looks away, like he's embarrassed by what he said. I stare at him. I feel my heart beat everywhere, even in my toes. I feel like doing something bold, but I could just as easily walk away. I'm not sure which option is smarter or better. I'm not sure that I care. I reach out and take his hand. His fingers slide between mine. I can't breathe. I stare up at him, and he stares down at me. For a long moment, we stay that way. Then I pull my hand away and run after Uriah and Lynn and Marlene. Maybe now he thinks I'm stupid, or strange. Maybe it was worth it. I get back to the dormitory before anyone else does, and when they start to trickle in, I get into bed and pretend to be asleep. I don't need any of them. Not if they're going to react this way when I do well. If I can make it through initiation, I will be dauntless, and I won't have to see them anymore. I don't need them. But do I want them? Every tattoo I got with them is a mark of their friendship, and almost every time I have laughed in this dark place was because of them. I don't want to lose them, but I feel like I have already. After at least a half hour of racing thoughts, I roll onto my back and open my eyes. The dormitory is dark now. Everyone has gone to bed. Probably exhausted from resenting me so much, I think with a wry smile. As if coming from the most hated faction wasn't enough, now I'm showing them up too. I get out of bed to get a drink of water. I'm not thirsty, but I need to do something. My bare feet make sticky sounds on the floor as I walk, my hands skimming the wall to keep my path straight. A bulb glows blue above the drinking fountain. I tug my hair over one shoulder and bend over. As soon as the water touches my lips, I hear voices at the end of the hallway. I creep closer to them, trusting the dark to keep me hidden. So far there haven't been any signs of it. Eric's voice. Signs of what? Well, you wouldn't have seen much of it yet, someone replies. A female voice. Cold and familiar, but familiar like a dream, not a real person. Combat training shows you nothing. The simulations, however, reveal who the Divergent rebels are, if there are any, so we will have to examine the footage several times to be sure. The word, Divergent, makes me go cold. I lean forward, my back pressed to the stone, to see who the familiar voice belongs to. Don't forget the reason I had Max appoint you, the voice says. Your first priority is always finding them. Always. I won't forget. I shift a few inches forward, hoping I am still hidden. Whoever that voice belongs to, she is pulling the strings. She is responsible for Eric's leadership position. She is the one who wants me dead. I tilt my head forward, straining to see them before they turn the corner. Then someone grabs me from behind. I start to scream, but a hand claps over my mouth. It smells like soap, and it's big enough to cover the lower half of my face. I thrash, but the arms holding me are too strong, and I bite down on one of the fingers. Ow! A rough voice cries. Shut up, and keep her mouth covered. That voice is higher than the average male's, and clearer. Peter. A strip of dark cloth covers my eyes, and a new pair of hands ties it at the back of my head. I struggle to breathe. There are at least 2 hands on my arms, dragging me forward, and one on my back, shoving me in the same direction, and one on my mouth, keeping my screams in. 3 people. My chest hurts. I can't resist 3 people on my own. Wonder what it sounds like when a stiff begs for mercy, Peter says with a chuckle. Hurry up. I try to focus on the hand on my mouth. There must be something distinct about it that will make him easier to identify. His identity is a problem I can solve. I need to solve a problem right now, or I will panic. The palm is sweaty and soft. I clench my teeth and breathe through my nose. The soap smell is familiar. Lemongrass and sage. The same smell surrounds Al's bunk. A weight drops into my stomach. I hear the crash of water against rocks. We are near the chasm. We must be above it, given the volume of the sound. I press my lips together to keep from screaming. If we are above the chasm, I know what they intend to do to me. Lift her up, come on! I thrash, and their rough skin grates against mine, but I know it's useless. I scream too, knowing that no one can hear me here. I will survive until tomorrow. I will. The hands push me around and up and slam my spine into something hard and cold. Judging by its width and curvature, it is a metal railing. It is the metal railing, the one that overlooks the chasm. My breaths wheeze and mist touches the back of my neck. The hands force my back to arch over the railing. My feet leave the ground. and my attackers are the only thing keeping me from falling into the water. A heavy hand gropes along my chest. "You sure you're 16, Stiff? Doesn't feel like you're more than 12. The other boy laughs. Bile rises in my throat, and I swallow the bitter taste. "Wait. I think I found something." His hand squeezes me. I bite my tongue to keep from screaming. More laughter. Al's hand slips from my mouth. "Stop that," he snaps. I recognize his low, distinct voice. When Al lets go of me, I thrash again and slip down to the ground. This time I bite down as hard as I can on the first arm I find. I hear a scream and clench my jaw harder, tasting blood. Something hard strikes my face. White heat races through my head. It would have been pain if adrenaline wasn't coursing through me like acid. The boy wrenches his trapped arm away from me and throws me to the ground. I bang my elbow against stone and bring my hands up to my head to remove the blindfold. A foot drives into my side, forcing the air from my lungs. I gasp and cough and claw at the back of my head. Someone grabs a handful of my hair and slams my head against something hard. A scream of pain bursts from my mouth, and I feel dizzy. Clumsily, I fumble along the side of my head to find the edge of the blindfold. I drag my heavy hand up, taking the blindfold with it, and blink. The scene before me is sideways and bobs up and down. I see someone running toward us, and someone running away, someone large. Al. I grab the railing next to me and haul myself to my feet. Peter wraps a hand around my throat and lifts me up, his thumb wedged under my chin. His hair, which is usually shiny and smooth, is tousled and sticks to his forehead. His pale face is contorted, and his teeth are gritted, and he holds me over the chasm as spots appear on the edges of my vision, crowding around his face, green and pink and blue. He says nothing. I try to kick him, but my legs are too short. My lungs scream for air. I hear a shout, and he releases me. I stretch out my arms as I fall, gasping, and my armpits slam into the railing. I hook my elbows over it and groan. Mist touches my ankles. The world dips and sways around me. And someone is on the pit floor. Drew, screaming. I hear thumps, kicks, groans. I blink a few times and focus as hard as I can on the only face I can see. It is contorted with anger. His eyes are dark blue. 4. I croak. I close my eyes, and hands wrap around my arms, right where they join with the shoulder. He pulls me over the railing and against his chest, gathering me into his arms, easing an arm under my knees. I press my face into his shoulder, and there is a sudden, hollow silence. Chapter 22. I open my eyes to the words, "Fear God alone," painted on a plain white wall. I hear the sound of running water again, but this time it's from a faucet, and not from the chasm. Seconds go by before I see definite edges in my surroundings, the lines of door frame and countertop and ceiling. The pain is a constant throb in my head and cheek and ribs. I shouldn't move. It will make everything worse. I see a blue patchwork quilt under my head and wince as I tilt my head to see where the water sound is coming from. 4 stands in the bathroom with his hands in the sink. Blood from his knuckles turns the sink water pink. He has a cut at the corner of his mouth, but he seems otherwise unharmed. His expression is placid as he examines his cuts, turns off the water and dries his hands with a towel. I have only one memory of getting here, and even that is just a single image. Black ink curling around the side of a neck, the corner of a tattoo, and the gentle sway that could only mean he was carrying me. He turns off the bathroom light and gets an ice pack from the refrigerator in the corner of the room. As he walks toward me, I consider closing my eyes and pretending to be asleep. But then our eyes meet, and it's too late. "Your hands," I croak. "My hands are none of your concern," he replies. He rests his knee on the mattress and leans over me, slipping the ice pack under my head. Before he pulls away, I reach out to touch the cut on the side of his lip, but stop when I realize what I am about to do, my hand hovering. What do you have to lose? I ask myself. I touch my fingertips lightly to his mouth. Triss, he says, speaking against my fingers. I'm all right. Why were you there? I ask, letting my hand drop. I was coming back from the control room. I heard a scream. What did you do to them? I say. I deposited Drew at the infirmary a half-hour ago, he says. Peter and Al ran. Drew claimed they were just trying to scare you. At least, I think that's what he was trying to say. He's in bad shape. He'll live, he replies. He adds bitterly, in what condition I can't say. It isn't right to wish pain on other people just because they hurt me first. But white-hot triumph races through me at the thought of Drew in the infirmary, and I squeeze For's arm. Good, I say. My voice sounds tight and fierce. Anger builds inside me, replacing my blood with bitter water and filling me, consuming me. I want to break something or hit something, but I am afraid to move, so I start crying instead. For crouches by the side of the bed and watches me. I see no sympathy in his eyes. I would have been disappointed if I had. He pulls his wrist free and, to my surprise, rests his hand on the side of my face, his thumb skimming my cheekbone. His fingers are careful. I could report this, he says. No, I reply. I don't want them to think I'm scared. He nods. He moves his thumb absently over my cheekbone, back and forth. I figured you would say that. You think it would be a bad idea if I sat up? I'll help you. For grips my shoulder with one hand and holds my head steady with the other as I push myself up. Pain rushes through my body in sharp bursts, but I try to ignore it, stifling a groan. He hands me the ice pack. You can let yourself be in pain, he says. It's just me here. I bite down on my lip. There are tears on my face, but neither of us mentions or even acknowledges them. I suggest you rely on your transfer friends to protect you from now on, he says. I thought I was, I say. I feel Al's hand against my mouth again, and a sob jolts my body forward. I press my hand to my forehead and rock slowly back and forth. But Al, he wanted you to be the small, quiet girl from abnegation, For says softly. He hurt you because your strength made him feel weak. No other reason. I nod and try to believe him. The others won't be as jealous if you show some vulnerability, even if it isn't real. You think I have to pretend to be vulnerable? I ask, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I do. He takes the ice pack from me, his fingers brushing mine, and holds it against my head himself. I put my hand down, too eager to relax my arm to object. For stands up. I stare at the hem of his t-shirt. Sometimes I see him as just another person, and sometimes I feel the sight of him in my gut, like a deep ache. You're going to want to march into breakfast tomorrow and show your attackers they had no effect on you, he adds. But you should let that bruise on your cheek show, and keep your head down. The idea nauseates me. I don't think I can do that, I say hollowly. I lift my eyes to his. You have to. I don't think you get it. Heat rises into my face. They touched me. His entire body tightens at my words, his hand clenching around the ice pack. Touched you? He repeats, his dark eyes cold. Not in the way you're thinking. I clear my throat. I didn't realize when I said it how awkward it would be to talk about. But almost. I look away. He is silent and still for so long that eventually I have to say something. What is it? I don't want to say this, he says. but I feel like I have to. It is more important for you to be safe than right, for the time being. Understand? His straight eyebrows are drawn low over his eyes. My stomach writhes, partly because I know he makes a good point, but I don't want to admit it, and partly because I want something I don't know how to express. I want to press against the space between us until it disappears. I nod. But please, when you see an opportunity... He presses his hand to my cheek, cold and strong, and tilts my head up so I have to look at him. His eyes glint. They look almost predatory. Ruin them. I laugh shakily. You're a little scary, For. Do me a favor, he says. And don't call me that. What should I call you then? Nothing. He takes his hand from my face. Yet. Chapter 23. I don't go back to the dorms that night. Sleeping in the same room as the people who attacked me just to look brave would be stupid. For sleeps on the floor and I sleep on his bed, on top of the quilt, breathing in the scent of his pillowcase. It smells like detergent, and something heavy, sweet, and distinctly male. The rhythm of his breath slows, and I prop myself up to see if he is asleep. He lies on his stomach with one arm around his head. His eyes are closed, his lips parted. For the first time, he looks as young as he is, and I wonder who he really is. Who is he when he isn't Dauntless, isn't an instructor, isn't For, isn't anything in particular? Whoever he is, I like him. It's easier for me to admit that to myself now, in the dark, after all that just happened. He is not sweet, or gentle, or particularly kind, but he is smart and brave, and even though he saved me, he treated me like I was strong. That is all I need to know. I watch the muscles in his back expand and contract until I fall asleep. I wake to aches and pains. I cringe as I sit up, holding my ribs, and walk up to the small mirror on the opposite wall. I am almost too short to see myself in it, but when I stand on my tiptoes, I can see my face. As expected, there is a dark blue bruise on my cheek. I hate the idea of slumping into the dining hall like this, but For's instructions have stayed with me. I have to mend my friendships. I need the protection of seeming weak. I tie my hair in a knot at the back of my head. The door opens, and For walks in, a towel in hand and his hair glistening with shower water. I feel a thrill in my stomach when I see the line of skin that shows above his belt as he lifts his hand to dry his hair and force my eyes up to his face. Hi, I say. My voice sounds tight. I wish it didn't. He touches my bruised cheek with just his fingertips. Not bad, he says. How's your head? Fine, I say. I'm lying. My head is throbbing. I brush my fingers over the bump, and pain prickles over my scalp. It could be worse. I could be floating in the river. Every muscle in my body tightens as his hand drops to my side, where I got kicked. He does it casually, but I can't move. And your side? He asks, his voice low. Only hurts when I breathe. He smiles. Not much you can do about that. Peter would probably throw a party if I stopped breathing. Well, he says, I would only go if there was cake. I laugh, and then wince, covering his hand to steady my rib cage. He slides his hand back slowly, his fingertips grazing my side. When his fingers lift, I feel an ache in my chest. Once this moment ends, I have to remember what happened last night, and I want to stay here with him. He nods a little and leads the way out. I'll go in first, he says when we stand outside the dining hall. See you soon, Triss. He walks through the doors and I am alone. Yesterday he told me he thought I would have to pretend to be weak, but he was wrong. I am weak already. I brace myself against the wall and press my forehead to my hands. It's difficult to take deep breaths, so I take short, shallow ones. I can't let this happen. They attacked me to make me feel weak. I can pretend they succeeded to protect myself, but I can't let it become true. I pull away from the wall and walk into the dining hall without another thought. A few steps in, I remember I'm supposed to look like I'm cowering, so I slow my pace and hug the wall, keeping my head down. Uriah, at the table next to Will and Christina's, lifts his hand to wave at me, and then puts it down. I sit next to Will. Al isn't there. He isn't anywhere. Uriah slides into the seat next to me, leaving his half-eaten muffin and half-finished glass of water on the other table. For a second, all three of them just stare at me. "What happened?" Will asks, lowering his voice. I look over his shoulder at the table behind ours. Peter sits there, eating a piece of toast and whispering something to Molly. My hand clenches around the edge of the table. I want him to hurt. But now isn't the time. Drew is missing, which means he's still in the infirmary. Vicious pleasure courses through me at the thought. "Peter, Drew," I say quietly. I hold my side as I reach across the table for a piece of toast. It hurts to stretch out my hand, so I let myself wince and hunch over. And I swallow. And Al. "Oh, God," says Christina, her eyes wide. "Are you all right?" Uriah asks. Peter's eyes find mine across the dining hall, and I have to force myself to look away. It brings a bitter taste to my mouth to show him that he scares me, but I have to. Four was right. I have to do everything I can to make sure I don't get attacked again. "Not really," I say. My eyes burn, and it's not artifice, unlike the wincing. I shrug. I believe Tori's warning now. Peter, Drew, and Al were ready to throw me into the chasm out of jealousy. What is so unbelievable about the Dauntless leaders committing murder? I feel uncomfortable, like I'm wearing someone else's skin. If I'm not careful, I could die. I can't even trust the leaders of my faction, my new family. "But you're just..." Uriah purses his lips. "It isn't fair. 3 against 1? Yeah. And Peter is all about what's fair. That's why he grabbed Edward in his sleep and stabbed him in the eye." Christina snorts and shakes her head. "Al, though? Are you sure, Tris?" I stare at my plate. I'm the next Edward. But unlike him, I'm not going to leave. "Yeah," I say. "I'm sure." "It has to be desperation," says Will. "He's been acting, I don't know, like a different person, ever since stage 2 started." Then Drew shuffles into the dining hall. I drop my toast, and my mouth drifts open. Calling him bruised would be an understatement. His face is swollen and purple. He has a split lip and a cut running through his eyebrow. He keeps his eyes down on the way to his table, not even lifting them to look at me. I glance across the room at Four. He wears the satisfied smile I wish I had on. "Did you do that?" hisses Will. I shake my head. "No. Someone, I never saw who, found me right before." I gulp. Saying it out loud makes it worse, makes it real. "I got tossed into the chasm." "They were going to kill you?" says Christina in a low voice. "Maybe. They might have been planning on dangling me over it just to scare me." I lift a shoulder. "It worked." Christina gives me a sad look. Will just glares at the table. "We have to do something about this," Uriah says in a low voice. "What? Like beat them up?" Christina grins. "Looks like that's been taken care of already." "No, that's pain they can get over," replies Uriah. "We have to edge them out of the rankings. That will damage their futures, permanently." Four gets up and stands between the tables. Conversation abruptly ceases. Transfers. We're doing something different today, he says. Follow me. We stand and Uriah's forehead wrinkles. Be careful, he tells me. Don't worry, says Will. We'll protect her. 4 leads us out of the dining hall and along the paths that surround the pit. Will is on my left. Christina is on my right. I never really said I was sorry, Christina says quietly, for taking the flag when you earned it. I don't know what was wrong with me. I'm not sure if it's smart to forgive her or not, to forgive either of them, after what they said to me when the rankings went up yesterday. But my mother would tell me that people are flawed, and I should be lenient with them. And 4 told me to rely on my friends. I don't know who I should rely on more, because I'm not sure who my true friends are. Uriah and Marlene, who were on my side even when I seemed strong. Or Christina and Will, who have always protected me when I seemed weak. When her wide brown eyes meet mine, I nod. Let's just forget about it. I still want to be angry, but I have to let my anger go. We climb higher than I've gone before, until Will's face goes white whenever he looks down. Most of the time I like heights, so I grab Will's arm like I need his support. But really, I'm lending him mine. He smiles gratefully at me. 4 turns around and walks backward a few steps, backward on a narrow path with no railing. How well does he know this place? He eyes Drew, who trudges at the back of the group and says, "Pick up the pace, Drew!" It's a cruel joke, but it's hard for me to fight off a smile. That is, until 4's eyes shift to my arm around Will's, and all the humor drains from them. His expression sends a chill through me. Is he jealous? We get closer and closer to the glass ceiling, and for the first time in days, I see the sun. 4 walks up a flight of metal stairs leading through a hole in the ceiling. They creak under my feet, and I look down to see the pit and the chasm below us. We walk across the glass, which is now a floor rather than a ceiling, through a cylindrical room with glass walls. The surrounding buildings are half collapsed and appear to be abandoned, which is probably why I never noticed the Dauntless compound before. The abnegation sector is also far away. The Dauntless mill around the glass room, talking in clusters. At the edge of the room, 2 Dauntless fight with sticks, laughing when one of them misses and hits only air. Above me, 2 ropes stretch across the room, one a few feet higher than the other. They probably have something to do with the daredevil stunts the Dauntless are famous for. 4 leads us through another door. Beyond it is a huge, dank space, with graffitied walls and exposed pipes. The room is lit by a series of old-fashioned fluorescent tubes with plastic covers. They must be ancient. This, says 4, his eyes bright in pale light, is a different kind of simulation, known as the Fear Landscape. It has been disabled for our purposes, so this isn't what it will be like the next time you see it. Behind him, the word Dauntless is spray-painted in red artistic lettering on a concrete wall. Through your simulations, we have stored data about your worst fears. The Fear Landscape accesses that data and presents you with a series of virtual obstacles. Some of the obstacles will be fears you previously faced in your simulations. Some may be new fears. The difference is that you are aware, in the Fear Landscape, that it is a simulation, so you will have all your wits about you as you go through it. That means that everyone will be like Divergent in the Fear Landscape. I don't know if that's a relief, because I can't be detected, or a problem, because I won't have the advantage. 4 continues. The number of fears you have in your landscape varies according to how many you have. How many fears will I have? I think of facing the crows again and shiver, though the air is warm. I told you before that the 3rd stage of initiation focuses on mental preparation, he says. I remember when he said that, on the first day, right before he put a gun to Peter's head. I wish he had pulled the trigger. That is because it requires you to control both your emotions and your body, to combine the physical abilities you learned in Stage 1 with the emotional mastery you learned in Stage 2, to keep a level head. One of the fluorescent tubes above For's head twitches and flickers. For stops scanning the crowd of initiates and focuses his stare on me. Next week, you will go through your fear landscape as quickly as possible in front of a panel of dauntless leaders. That will be your final test, which determines your ranking for Stage 3. Just as Stage 2 of initiation is weighted more heavily than Stage 1, Stage 3 is weighted heaviest of all. Understood? We all nod. Even Drew, who makes it look painful. If I do well in my final test, I have a good chance of making it into the top 10, and a good chance of becoming a member, becoming dauntless. The thought makes me almost giddy with relief. You can get past each obstacle in one of two ways. Either you find a way to calm down enough that the simulation registers a normal, steady heartbeat, or you find a way to face your fear, which can force the simulation to move on. One way to face a fear of drowning is to swim deeper, for example. For shrugs. So I suggest that you take the next week to consider your fears and develop strategies to face them. That doesn't sound fair, says Peter. What if one person only has 7 fears and someone else has 20? That's not their fault. For stares at him for a few seconds and then laughs. Do you really want to talk to me about what's fair? The crowd of initiates parts to make way for him as he walks toward Peter, folds his arms and says, in a deadly voice, I understand why you're worried, Peter. The events of last night certainly prove that you are a miserable coward. Peter stares back, expressionless. So now we all know, says For quietly, that you are afraid of a short, skinny girl from abnegation. His mouth curls in a smile. Will puts his arm around me. Christina's shoulders shake with suppressed laughter. And somewhere within me, I find a smile too. When we get back to the dorm that afternoon, Al is there. Will stands behind me and holds my shoulders, lightly, as if to remind me that he's there. Christina edges closer to me. Al's eyes have shadows beneath them, and his face is swollen from crying. Pain stabs my stomach when I see him. I can't move. The scent of lemongrass and sage, once pleasant, turns sour in my nose. Trish, says Al, his voice breaking. Can I talk to you? Are you kidding? Will squeezes my shoulders. You don't get to come near her ever again. I won't hurt you. I never wanted to. Al covers his face with both hands. I just want to say that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Please, forgive me. Please. He reaches for me like he's going to touch my shoulder or my hand, his face wet with tears. Somewhere inside me is a merciful, forgiving person. Somewhere there is a girl who tries to understand what people are going through, who accepts that people do evil things and that desperation leads them to darker places than they ever imagined. I swear she exists, and she hurts for the repentant boy I see in front of me. But if I saw her, I wouldn't recognize her. Stay away from me, I say quietly. My body feels rigid and cold. And I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm nothing. I say, my voice low, never come near me again. Our eyes meet. His are dark and glassy. I'm nothing. If you do, I swear to God, I will kill you. I say, you coward. Chapter 24. Triss. In my dream, my mother says my name. She beckons to me, and I cross the kitchen to stand beside her. She points to the pot on the stove, and I lift the lid to peek inside. The beady eye of a crow stares back at me, its wing feathers pressed to the side of the pot, its fat body covered with boiling water. "Dinner," she says. "Tris!" I hear again. I open my eyes. Christina stands next to my bed, her cheeks streaked with mascara-tinted tears. "It's Al," she says. "Come on." Some of the other initiates are awake, and some aren't. Christina grabs my hand and pulls me out of the dormitory. I run barefoot over the stone floor, blinking clouds from my eyes, my limbs still heavy with sleep. Something terrible has happened. I feel it with every thump of my heart. It's Al. We run across the pit floor, and then Christina stops. A crowd has gathered around the ledge, but everyone stands a few feet from one another, so there's enough space for me to maneuver past Christina and around a tall, middle-aged man to the front. 2 men stand next to the ledge, hoisting something up with ropes. They both grunt from the effort, heaving their weight back so the ropes slide over the railing, and then reaching forward to grab again. A huge dark shape appears above the ledge, and a few dauntless rush forward to help the 2 men haul it over. The shape falls with a thud on the pit floor. A pale arm, swollen with water, flops onto the stone. A body. Christina pulls herself tight to my side, clinging to my arm. She turns her head into my shoulder and sobs, but I can't look away. A few of the men turn the body over, and the head flops to the side. The eyes are open and empty, dark, doll's eyes, and the nose has a high arch, a narrow bridge, a round tip. The lips are blue. The face itself is something other than human, half corpse and half creature. My lungs burn. My next breath rattles on the way in. Al. "One of the initiates," says someone behind me. "What happened?" "Same thing that happens every year," someone else replies. "He pitched himself over the ledge." "Don't be so morbid. Could have been an accident." "They found him in the middle of the chasm. You think he tripped over his shoelace and, whoopsies, just stumbled 15 feet forward?" Christina's hands get tighter and tighter around my arm. I should tell her to let go of me. It's starting to hurt. Someone kneels next to Al's face and pushes his eyelids shut, trying to make it look like he's sleeping, maybe. Stupid. Why do people want to pretend that death is sleep? It isn't. It isn't. Something inside me collapses. My chest is so tight, suffocating, can't breathe. I sink to the ground, dragging Christina down with me. The stone is rough under my knees. I hear something, a memory of sound. Al sobs, his screams at night. Should have known. Still can't breathe. I press both palms to my chest and rock back and forth to free the tension in my chest. When I blink, I see the top of Al's head as he carries me on his back to the dining hall. I feel the bounce of his footsteps. He is big and warm and clumsy. No, was. That is death, shifting from is to was. I wheeze. Someone has brought a large black bag to put the body in. I can tell that it will be too small. A laugh rises in my throat and flops from my mouth, strained and gurgling. Al's too big for the body bag. What a tragedy. Halfway through the laugh, I clamp my mouth shut, and it sounds more like a groan. I pull my arm free and stand, leaving Christina on the ground. I run. "Here you go," Tori says. She hands me a steaming mug that smells like peppermint. I hold it with both hands, my fingers prickling with warmth. She sits down across from me. When it comes to funerals, the Dauntless don't waste any time. Tori said they want to acknowledge death as soon as it happens. There are no people in the front room of the tattoo parlor, but the pit is crawling with people, most of them drunk. I don't know why that surprises me. At home, A funeral's a somber occasion. Everyone gathers to support the deceased's family, and no one has idle hands, but there is no laughter, or shouting, or joking. And the abnegation don't drink alcohol, so everyone is sober. It makes sense that funerals would be the opposite here. "Drink it," she says. "It will make you feel better, I promise." "I don't think tea is the solution," I say slowly, but I sip it anyway. It warms my mouth and my throat and trickles into my stomach. I didn't realize how deeply cold I was until I wasn't anymore. Better is the word I used, not good. She smiles at me, but the corners of her eyes don't crinkle like they usually do. I don't think good will happen for a while. I bite my lip. How long? I struggle for the right words. How long did it take for you to be okay again? After your brother? Don't know. She shakes her head. Some days I feel like I'm still not okay. Some days I feel fine. Happy even. It took me a few years to stop plotting revenge, though. Why did you stop? I ask. Her eyes go vacant as she stares at the wall behind me. She taps her fingers against her leg for a few seconds and then says, I don't think of it as stopping. More like I'm waiting for my opportunity. She comes out of her daze and checks her watch. Time to go, she says. I pour the rest of my tea down the sink. When I lift my hand from the mug, I realize that I'm shaking. Not good. My hands usually shake before I start to cry, and I can't cry in front of everyone. I follow Tori out of the tattoo place and down the path to the pit floor. All the people that were milling around earlier are gathered by the ledge now, and the air smells potently of alcohol. The woman in front of me lurches to the right, losing her balance, and then erupts into giggles as she falls against the man next to her. Tori grabs my arm and steers me away. I find Uriah, Will, and Christina standing among the other initiates. Christina's eyes are swollen. Uriah is holding a silver flask. He offers it to me. I shake my head. Surprise, surprise, says Molly from behind me. She nudges Peter with her elbow. Once a stiff, always a stiff. I should ignore her. Her opinion shouldn't matter to me. I read an interesting article today, she says, leaning closer to my ear. Something about your dad, and the real reason you left your old faction. Defending myself isn't the most important thing on my mind, but it is the easiest one to address. I twist, and my fist connects with her jaw. My knuckles sting from the impact. I don't remember deciding to punch her. I don't remember forming a fist. She lunges at me, her hands outstretched, but she doesn't get far. Will grabs her collar and pulls her back. He looks from her to me and says, Quit it, both of you. Part of me wishes that he hadn't stopped her. A fight would be a welcome distraction, especially now that Eric is climbing onto a box next to the railing. I face him, crossing my arms to keep myself steady. I wonder what he'll say. In abnegation, no one has committed suicide in recent memory, but the faction's stance on it is clear. Suicide to them is an act of selfishness. Someone who is truly selfless does not think of himself often enough to desire death. No one would say that out loud, if it happened, but everyone would think it. Quiet down, everyone! Shouts Eric. Someone hits what sounds like a gong, and the shouts gradually stop, though the mutters don't. Eric says, Thank you. As you know, we're here because Albert, an initiate, jumped into the chasm last night. The mutters stop too, leaving just the rush of water in the chasm. We do not know why, says Eric, and it would be easy to mourn the loss of him tonight. But we did not choose a life of ease when we became dauntless. And the truth of it is, Eric smiles. If I didn't know him, I would think that smile is genuine. But I do know him. The truth is, Albert is now exploring an unknown, uncertain place. He leaped into vicious waters to get there. Who among us is brave enough to venture into that darkness without knowing what lies beyond it? Albert was not yet one of our members, but we can be assured that he was one of our bravest. A cry rises from the center of the crowd, and a whoop. The Dauntless cheer at varying pitches, high and low, bright and deep. Their roar mimics the roar of the water. Christina takes the flask from Uriah and drinks. Will slides his arm around her shoulders and pulls her to his side. Voices fill my ears. "We will celebrate him now and remember him always," yells Eric. Someone hands him a dark bottle and he lifts it. "To Albert the Courageous!" "To Albert!" shouts the crowd. Arms lift all around me, and the Dauntless chant his name. "Albert! Albert! Albert!" They chant until his name no longer sounds like his name. It sounds like the primal scream of an ancient race. I turn away from the railing. I cannot stand this any longer. I don't know where I'm going. I suspect that I am not going anywhere at all, just away. I walk down a dark hallway. At the end is the drinking fountain, bathed in the blue glow of the light above it. I shake my head. Courageous? Courageous would have been admitting weakness and leaving Dauntless, no matter what shame accompanied it. Pride is what killed Al, and it is the flaw in every Dauntless heart. It is in mine. Triss! A jolt goes through me, and I turn around. 4 stands behind me, just inside the blue circle of light. It gives him an eerie look, shading his eye sockets and casting shadows under his cheekbones. "What are you doing here?" I ask. "Shouldn't you be paying your respects?" I say it like it tastes bad, and I have to spit it out. "Shouldn't you?" he says. He steps toward me, and I see his eyes again. They look black in this light. "Can't pay respect when you don't have any," I reply. I feel a twinge of guilt and shake my head. "I didn't mean that." "Ah." Judging by the look he gives me, he doesn't believe me. I don't blame him. "This is ridiculous," I say, heat rushing into my cheeks. "He throws himself off a ledge and Eric's calling it brave? Eric, who tried to have you throw knives at Al's head?" I taste bile. Eric's false smiles, his artificial words, his twisted ideals. They make me want to be sick. "He wasn't brave. He was depressed and a coward, and he almost killed me. Is that the kind of thing we respect here?" "What do you want them to do?" he says. "Condemn him? Al's already dead. He can't hear it, and it's too late." "It's not about Al," I snap. "It's about everyone watching. Everyone who now sees hurling themselves into the chasm as a viable option. I mean, why not do it if everyone calls you a hero afterward? Why not do it if everyone will remember your name? I can't." I shake my head. My face burns and my heart pounds, and I try to keep myself under control, but I can't. "This would never have happened in abnegation," I almost shout. "None of it. Never. This place warped him and ruined him, and I don't care if saying that makes me a stiff. I don't care. I don't care." 4's eyes shift to the wall above the drinking fountain. "Careful, Triss," he says, his eyes still on the wall. "Is that all you can say?" I demand, scowling at him. "That I should be careful? That's it? You're as bad as the candor, you know that?" He grabs my arm and drags me away from the drinking fountain. His hand hurts my arm, but I'm not strong enough to pull away. His face is so close to mine that I can see a few freckles spotting his nose. "I'm not going to say this again, so listen carefully." He sets his hands on my shoulders, his fingers pressing, squeezing. I feel small. "They are watching you. You, in particular." "Let go of me," I say weakly. His fingers spring apart and he straightens. Some of the weight on my chest lifts now that he isn't touching me. I fear his shifting moods. They show me something unstable inside of him, and instability is dangerous. Are they watching you too? I say, so quietly he wouldn't be able to hear me if he wasn't standing so close. He doesn't answer my question. I keep trying to help you, he says, but you refuse to be helped. Oh, right. Your help, I say, stabbing my ear with a knife and taunting me and yelling at me more than you yell at anyone else. It sure is helpful. Taunting you? You mean when I threw the knives? I wasn't taunting you, he snaps. I was reminding you that if you failed, someone else would have to take your place. I cup the back of my neck with my hand and think back to the knife incident. Every time he spoke, it was to remind me that if I gave up, Al would have to take my place in front of the target. Why? I say. Because you're from abnegation, he says, and it's when you're acting selflessly that you are at your bravest. I understand now. He wasn't persuading me to give up. He was reminding me why I couldn't, because I needed to protect Al. The thought makes me ache now. Protect Al, my friend, my attacker. I can't hate Al as much as I want to. I can't forgive him either. If I were you, I would do a better job of pretending that selfless impulse is going away, he says. Because if the wrong people discover it, well, it won't be good for you. Why? Why do they care about my intentions? Intentions are the only thing they care about. They try to make you think they care about what you do, but they don't. They don't want you to act a certain way. They want you to think a certain way, so you're easy to understand, so you won't pose a threat to them. He presses a hand to the wall next to my head and leans into it. His shirt is just tight enough that I can see his collarbone and the faint depression between his shoulder muscle and his bicep. I wish I was taller. If I was tall, my narrow build would be described as willowy instead of childish, and he might not see me as a little sister he needs to protect. I don't want him to see me as his sister. I don't understand, I say. Why they care what I think as long as I'm acting how they want me to. You're acting how they want you to now, he says. But what happens when your abnegation-wired brain tells you to do something else, something they don't want? I don't have an answer to that. And I don't even know if he's right about me. Am I wired like the abnegation or the dauntless? Maybe the answer is neither. Maybe I am wired like the Divergent. I might not need you to help me. Ever think about that? I say. I'm not weak, you know. I can do this on my own. He shakes his head. You think my first instinct is to protect you, because you're small or a girl or a stiff? But you're wrong. He leans his face close to mine and wraps his fingers around my chin. His hand smells like metal. When was the last time he held a gun? Or a knife? My skin tingles at the point of contact, like he's transmitting electricity through his skin. My first instinct is to push you until you break, just to see how hard I have to press, he says, his fingers squeezing at the word break. My body tenses at the edge in his voice, so I am coiled as tight as a spring, and I forget to breathe. His dark eyes lifting to mine, he adds, but I resist it. Why? I swallow hard. Why? Is that your first instinct? Fear doesn't shut you down. It wakes you up. I've seen it. It's fascinating. He releases me but doesn't pull away, his hand grazing my jaw, my neck. Sometimes I just want to see it again, want to see you awake. I set my hands on his waist. I can't remember deciding to do that, but I also can't move away. I pull myself against his chest, wrapping my arms around him. My fingers skim the muscles of his back. After a moment, he touches the small of my back, pressing me closer. and smooths his other hand over my hair. I feel small again, but this time, it doesn't scare me. I squeeze my eyes shut. He doesn't scare me anymore. Should I be crying? I ask, my voice muffled by his shirt. Is there something wrong with me? The simulations drove a crack through Al so wide he could not mend it. Why not me? Why am I not like him? And why does that thought make me feel so uneasy, like I'm teetering on a ledge myself? You think I know anything about tears? He says quietly. I close my eyes. I don't expect Ford to reassure me, and he makes no effort to. But I feel better standing here than I did out there among the people who are my friends, my faction. I press my forehead to his shoulder. If I had forgiven him, I say, do you think he would be alive now? I don't know, he replies. He presses his hand to my cheek, and I turn my face into it, keeping my eyes closed. I feel like it's my fault. It isn't your fault, he says, touching his forehead to mine. But I should have. I should have forgiven him. Maybe. Maybe there's more we all could have done, he says. But we just have to let the guilt remind us to do better next time. I frown and pull back. That is a lesson that members of abnegation learn. Guilt as a tool, rather than a weapon against the self. It is a line straight from one of my father's lectures at our weekly meetings. What faction did you come from for? It doesn't matter, he replies, his eyes lowered. This is where I am now. Something you would do well to remember for yourself. He gives me a conflicted look and touches his lips to my forehead, right between my eyebrows. I close my eyes. I don't understand this, whatever it is, but I don't want to ruin it, so I say nothing. He doesn't move. He just stays there with his mouth pressed to my skin, and I stay there with my hands on his waist for a long time. Chapter 25. I stand with Will and Christina at the railing overlooking the chasm, late at night after most of the Dauntless have gone to sleep. Both my shoulders sting from the tattoo needle. We all got new tattoos a half hour ago. Tori was the only one in the tattoo place, so I felt safe getting the symbol of abnegation. A pair of hands, palms up as if to help someone stand, bounded by a circle, on my right shoulder. I know it was a risk, especially after all that's happened, but that symbol is a part of my identity, and it felt important to me that I wear it on my skin. I step up on one of the barrier's crossbars, pressing my hips to the railing to keep my balance. This is where Al stood. I look down into the chasm, at the black water, at the jagged rocks. Water hits the wall and sprays up, misting my face. Was he afraid when he stood here? Or was he so determined to jump that it was easy? Christina hands me a stack of paper. I got a copy of every report the erudite have released in the last 6 months. Throwing them into the chasm won't get rid of them forever, but it might make me feel better. I stare at the first one. On it is a picture of Janine, the erudite representative. Her sharp but attractive eyes stare back at me. Have you ever met her? I ask Will. Christina crumples the first report into a ball and hurls it into the water. Janine? Once, he replies. He takes the next report and tears it to shreds. The pieces float into the river. He does it without Christina's malice. I get the feeling that the only reason he's participating is to prove to me that he doesn't agree with his former faction's tactics. Whether he believes what they're saying or not is unclear, and I am afraid to ask. Before she was a leader, she worked with my sister. They were trying to develop a longer-lasting serum for the simulations, he says. Janine's so smart you can see it even before she says anything. Like a walking, talking computer. What? I fling one of the pages over the railing, pressing my lips together. I should just ask. What do you think about what she has to say? He shrugs. I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea to have more than one faction in control of the government. And maybe it would be nice if we had more cars and fresh fruit, and... You do realize there's no secret warehouse where all that stuff is kept, right? I ask, my face getting hot. Yes, I do, he says. I just think that comfort and prosperity are not a priority for abnegation, and maybe they would be if the other factions were involved in our decision-making. Because giving an erudite boy a car is more important than giving food to the factionless? I snap. Hey now, says Christina, brushing Will's shoulder with her fingers. This is supposed to be a light-hearted session of symbolic document destruction, not a political debate. I bite back what I was about to say, and stare at the stack of paper in my hands. Will and Christina share a lot of idle touches lately. I've noticed it. Have they? All that stuff she said about your dad, though, he says, makes me kind of hate her. Can't imagine what good can come of saying such terrible things. I can. If Janine can make people believe that my father and all the other abnegation leaders are corrupt and awful, she has support for whatever revolution she wants to start, if that's really her plan. But I don't want to argue again, so I just nod and throw the remaining sheets into the chasm. They drift back and forth, until they find the water. They will be filtered out at the chasm wall and discarded. It's bedtime, Christina says, smiling. Ready to go back? I think I want to put Peter's hand in a bowl of warm water to make him pee tonight. I turn away from the chasm and see movement on the right side of the pit. A figure climbs toward the glass ceiling, and judging by the smooth way he walks, like his feet barely leave the ground, I know it's Four. That sounds great, but I have to talk to Four about something, I say, pointing toward the shadow ascending the path. Her eyes follow my hand. Are you sure you should be running around here alone at night? She asks. I won't be alone. I'll be with Four. I bite my lip. Christina is looking at Will, and he is looking back at her. Neither of them is really listening to me. All right, Christina says distantly. Well, I'll see you later then. Christina and Will walk toward the dormitories. Christina tousling Will's hair, and Will jabbing her in the ribs. For a second, I watch them. I feel like I am witnessing the beginning of something, but I'm not sure what it will be. I jog to the path on the right side of the pit and start to climb. I try to make my footsteps as quiet as possible. Unlike Christina, I don't find it difficult to lie. I don't intend to talk to Four, at least not until I find out where he's going, late at night, in the glass building above us. I run quietly, breathless when I reach the stairs, and stand at one end of the glass room while Four stands at the other. Through the windows I see the city lights, glowing now, but petering out even as I look at them. They are supposed to turn off at midnight. Across the room, Four stands at the door to the fear landscape. He holds a black box in one hand and a syringe in the other. Since you're here, he says, without looking over his shoulder, you might as well go in with me. I bite my lip. Into your fear landscape? Yes. As I walk toward him, I ask, I can do that? The serum connects you to the program, he says, but the program determines whose landscape you go through. And right now, it's set to put us through mine. You would let me see that? Why else do you think I'm going in? He asks quietly. He doesn't lift his eyes. There are some things I want to show you. He holds up the syringe, and I tilt my head to better expose my neck. I feel sharp pain when the needle goes in, but I'm used to it now. When he's done, he offers me the black box. In it is another syringe. I've never done this before, I say as I take it out of the box. I don't want to hurt him. Right here, he says, touching a spot on his neck with his fingernail. I stand on my tiptoes and push the needle in, my hands shaking a little. He doesn't even flinch. He keeps his eyes on me the whole time, and when I'm done, puts both syringes in the box and sets it by the door. He knew that I would follow him up here. Knew or hoped. Either way is fine with me. He offers me his hand and I slide mine into it. His fingers are cold and brittle. I feel like there is something I should say, but I am too stunned and can't come up with any words. He opens the door with his free hand, and I follow him into the dark. I am now used to entering unknown places without hesitation. I keep my breaths even and hold firmly to Four's hand. "See if you can figure out why they call me Four," he says. The door clicks shut behind us, taking all the light with it. The air is cold in the hallway. I feel each particle enter my lungs. I inch closer to him so my arm is against his, and my chin is near his shoulder. "What's your real name?" I ask. See if you can figure that out, too. The simulation takes us. The ground I stand on is no longer made of cement. It creaks like metal. Light pours in from all angles, and the city unfolds around us. Glass buildings and the arc of train tracks, and we are high above it. I haven't seen a blue sky in a long time, so when it spreads out above me, I feel the breath catch in my lungs, and the effect is dizzying. Then the wind starts. It blows so hard I have to lean against Four to stay on my feet. He removes his hand from mine and wraps his arm around my shoulders instead. At first I think it's to protect me, but no. He's having trouble breathing, and he needs me to steady him. He forces breath in and out through an open mouth, and his teeth are clenched. The height is beautiful to me, but if it's here, it is one of his worst nightmares. "We have to jump off, right?" I shout over the wind. He nods. "On 3, okay?" Another nod. 1, 2, 3. I pull him with me as I burst into a run. After we take the first step, the rest is easy. We both sprint off the edge of the building. We fall like 2 stones, fast, the air pushing back at us, the ground growing beneath us. Then the scene disappears, and I am on my hands and knees on the floor, grinning. I loved that rush the day I chose Dauntless, and I love it now. Next to me, Four gasps and presses a hand to his chest. I get up and help him to his feet. What's next? It's... Something solid hits my spine. I slam into Four, my head hitting his collarbone. Walls appear on my left and my right. The space is so narrow that Four has to pull his arms into his chest to fit. A ceiling slams onto the walls around us with a crack, and Four hunches over, groaning. The room is just big enough to accommodate his size, and no bigger. "Confinement," I say. He makes a guttural noise. I tilt my head and pull back enough to look at him. I can barely see his face. It's so dark, and the air is close. We share breaths. He grimaces like he's in pain. "Hey," I say. "It's okay. Here." I guide his arms around my body so he has more space. He clutches at my back and puts his face next to mine, still hunched over. His body is warm, but I feel only his bones and the muscle that wraps around them. Nothing yields beneath me. My cheeks get hot. Can he tell that I'm still built like a child? This is the first time I'm happy I'm so small. I laugh. If I joke, maybe I can calm him down and distract myself. "Mm-hmm," he says. His voice sounds strained. "We can't break out of here," I say. "It's easier to face the fear head-on, right?" I don't wait for a response. "So what you need to do is make the space smaller. Make it worse so it gets better, right?" "Yes." It is a tight, tense little word. "Okay. We'll have to crouch then. Ready?" I squeeze his waist to pull him down with me. I feel the hard line of his rib against my hand and hear the screech of one wood plank against another as the ceiling inches down with us. I realize that we won't fit with all this space between us, so I turn and curl into a ball, my spine against his chest. One of his knees is bent next to my head, and the other is curled beneath me, so I'm sitting on his ankle. We are a jumble of limbs. I feel a harsh breath against my ear. "Ah," he says, his voice raspy. "This is worse. This is definitely—" "Shh," I say. "Arms around me." Obediently, he slips both arms around my waist. I smile at the wall. I am not enjoying this. I am not even a little bit. No. "The simulation measures your fear response," I say softly. I'm just repeating what he told us, but reminding him might help him. "So if you can calm your heartbeat down, it will move on to the next one, remember? So try to forget that we're here." "Yeah." I feel his lips move against my ear as he speaks, and heat courses through me. "That easy, huh?" You know, most boys would enjoy being trapped in close quarters with a girl. I roll my eyes. "Not claustrophobic people, Triss." He sounds desperate now. Okay. I set my hand on top of his and guide it to my chest, so it's right over my heart. "Feel my heartbeat. Can you feel it?" "Yes." "Feel how steady it is?" "It's fast." "Yes, well, that has nothing to do with the box." I wince as soon as I'm done speaking. I just admitted to something. Hopefully he doesn't realize that. "Every time you feel me breathe, you breathe. Focus on that." "Okay." I breathe deeply, and his chest rises and falls with mine. After a few seconds of this, I say calmly, "Why don't you tell me where this fear comes from? Maybe talking about it will help us, somehow." I don't know how, but it sounds right. Okay." He breathes with me again. "This one is from my fantastic childhood. Childhood punishments. The tiny closet upstairs." I press my lips together. I remember being punished, sent to my room without dinner, deprived of this or that, firm scoldings. I was never shut in a closet. The cruelty smarts. My chest aches for him. I don't know what to say, so I try to keep it casual. "My mother kept our winter coats in our closet." "I don't," he gasps. "I don't really want to talk about it anymore." "Okay. Then I can talk. Ask me something." "Okay." He laughs shakily in my ear. "Why is your heart racing, Triss?" I cringe and say, "Well, I search for an excuse that doesn't involve his arms being around me. "I barely know you." Not good enough. "I barely know you, and I'm crammed up against you in a box for. What do you think?" "If we were in your fear landscape," he says, "would I be in it?" "I'm not afraid of you." "Of course you're not. But that's not what I meant." He laughs again, and when he does, the walls break apart with a crack and fall away, leaving us in a circle of light. Four sighs and lifts his arms from my body. I scramble to my feet and brush myself off, though I haven't accumulated any dirt that I'm aware of. I wipe my palms on my jeans. My back feels cold from the sudden absence of him. He stands in front of me. He's grinning, and I'm not sure I like the look in his eyes. "Maybe you were cut out for candor," he says, "because you're a terrible liar." I think my aptitude test ruled that one out pretty well. He shakes his head. "The aptitude test tells you nothing." I narrow my eyes. "What are you trying to tell me? Your test isn't the reason you ended up dauntless?" Excitement runs through me, like the blood in my veins, propelled by the hope that he might confirm that he is divergent, that he is like me, that we can figure out what it means together. "Not exactly, no," he says. He looks over his shoulder and his voice trails off. A woman stands a few yards away, pointing a gun at us. She is completely still, her features plain. If we walked away right now, I would not remember her. To my right, a table appears. On it is a gun and a single bullet. Why isn't she shooting us? Oh, I think. The fear is unrelated to the threat to his life. It has to do with the gun on the table. You have to kill her, I say softly. Every single time. She isn't real. She looks real. He bites his lip. It feels real. If she was real, she would have killed you already. It's okay. He nods. I'll just do it. This one's not so bad. Not as much panic involved. Not as much panic, but far more dread. I can see it in his eyes as he picks up the gun and opens the chamber, like he's done it 1,000 times. And maybe he has. He clicks the bullet into the chamber and holds the gun out in front of him, both hands around it. He squeezes one eye shut and breathes slowly in. As he exhales, he fires, and the woman's head whips back. I see a flash of red and look away. I hear her crumple to the floor. Four's gun drops with a thump. We stare at her fallen body. What he said is true. It does feel real. Don't be ridiculous. I grab his arm. Come on, I say. Let's go. Keep moving. After another tug, he comes out of his daze and follows me. As we pass the table, the woman's body disappears, except in my memory and his. What would it be like to kill someone every time I went through my landscape? Maybe I'll find out. But something puzzles me. These are supposed to be Four's worst fears, and though he panicked in the box and on the roof, he killed the woman without much difficulty. It seems like the simulation is grasping at any fears it can find within him, and it hasn't found much. Here we go, he whispers. A dark figure moves ahead of us, creeping along the edge of the circle of light, waiting for us to take another step. Who is it? Who frequents Four's nightmares? The man who emerges is tall and slim, with hair cut close to his scalp. He holds his hands behind his back, and he wears the gray clothes of abnegation. Marcus, I whisper. Here's the part, Four says, his voice shaking, where you figure out my name. Is he? I look from Marcus, who walks slowly toward us, to Four, who inches slowly back, and everything comes together. Marcus had a son who joined Dauntless. His name was Tobias. Marcus shows us his hands. A belt is curled around one of his fists. Slowly he unwinds it from his fingers. This is for your own good, he says, and his voice echoes 12 times. 12 Marcuses press into the circle of light, all holding the same belt, with the same blank expression. When the Marcuses blink again, their eyes turn into empty black pits. The belts slither along the floor, which is now white tile. A shiver crawls up my spine. The erudite accused Marcus of cruelty. For once, the erudite were right. I look at Four, Tobias, and he seems frozen. His posture sags. He looks years older. He looks years younger. The first Marcus yanks his arm back, the belt sailing over his shoulder as he prepares to strike. Tobias shrinks back, throwing his arms up to protect his face. I dart in front of him, and the belt cracks against my wrist, wrapping around it. A hot pain races up my arm to my elbow. I grit my teeth and pull as hard as I can. Marcus loses his grip, so I unwrap the belt and grab it by the buckle. I swing my arm as fast as I can, my shoulder socket burning from the sudden motion, and the belt strikes Marcus's shoulder. He yells and lunges at me with outstretched hands, with fingernails that look like claws. Tobias pushes me behind him, so he stands between me and Marcus. He looks angry, not afraid. All the Marcuses vanish. The lights come on, revealing a long, narrow room with busted brick walls and a cement floor. That's it? I say. Those were your worst fears? Why do you only have 4? My voice trails off. Only 4 fears. Oh. I look over my shoulder at him. That's why they call you. The words leave me when I see his expression. His eyes are wide and seem almost vulnerable under the room's lights. His lips are parted. If we were not here, I would describe the look as awe. But I don't understand why he would be looking at me in awe. He wraps his hand around my elbow, his thumb pressing to the soft skin above my forearm, and tugs me toward him. The skin around my wrist still stings, like the belt was real, but it is as pale as the rest of me. His lips slowly move against my cheek, then his arms tighten around my shoulders, and he buries his face in my neck, breathing against my collarbone. I stand stiffly for a second, and then loop my arms around him and sigh. "Hey," I say softly. "We got through it." He lifts his head and slips his fingers through my hair, tucking it behind my ear. We stare at each other in silence. His fingers move absently over a lock of my hair. "You got me through it," he says finally. "Well," my throat is dry. I try to ignore the nervous electricity that pulses through me every second he touches me. It's easy to be brave when they're not my fears. I let my hands drop and casually wipe them on my jeans, hoping he doesn't notice. If he does, he doesn't say so. He laces his fingers with mine. "Come on," he says. "I have something else to show you." Chapter 26. Hand in hand, we walk toward the pit. I monitor the pressure of my hand carefully. 1 minute, I feel like I'm not gripping hard enough, and the next, I'm squeezing too hard. I never used to understand why people bothered to hold hands as they walked, but then he runs one of his fingertips down my palm, and I shiver and understand it completely. So, I latch on the last logical thought I remember. 4 fears. 4 fears then, 4 fears now, he says, nodding. They haven't changed, so I keep going in there, but I still haven't made any progress. You can't be fearless, remember? I say, because you still care about things, about your life. I know. We walk along the edge of the pit on a narrow path that leads to the rocks at the bottom of the chasm. I've never noticed it before. It blended in with the rock wall, but Tobias seems to know it well. I don't want to ruin the moment, but I have to know about his aptitude test. I have to know if he's divergent. You were going to tell me about your aptitude results, I say. Ah. He scratches the back of his neck with his free hand. Does it matter? Yes, I want to know. How demanding you are. He smiles. We reach the end of the path and stand at the bottom of the chasm, where the rocks form unsteady ground, rising up at harsh angles from the rushing water. He leads me up and down, across small gaps and over angular ridges. My shoes cling to the rough rock. The soles of my shoes mark each rock with a wet footprint. He finds a relatively flat rock near the side, where the current isn't strong, and sits down, his feet dangling over the edge. I sit beside him. He seems comfortable here, inches above the hazardous water. He releases my hand. I look at the jagged edge of the rock. These are things I don't tell people, you know. Not even my friends, he says. I lace my fingers together and clench. This is the perfect place for him to tell me that he is divergent, if indeed that's what he is. The roar of the chasm ensures that we won't be overheard. I don't know why the thought makes me so nervous. My result was as expected, he says. Abnegation. Oh. Something inside me deflates. I am wrong about him. But I had assumed that if he was not divergent, he must have gotten a dauntless result. And technically, I also got an abnegation result, according to the system. Did the same thing happen to him? And if that's true, why isn't he telling me the truth? But you chose dauntless anyway? I say. Out of necessity. Why did you have to leave? His eyes dart away from mine, across the space in front of him, as if searching the air for an answer. He doesn't need to give one. I still feel the ghost of his stinging belt on my wrist. You had to get away from your dad, I say. Is that why you don't want to be a Dauntless leader? Because if you were, you might have to see him again? He lifts a shoulder. That, and I've always felt that I don't quite belong among the Dauntless. Not the way they are now, anyway. But you're incredible, I say. I pause and clear my throat. I mean, by Dauntless standards, 4 fears is unheard of. How could you not belong here? He shrugs. He doesn't seem to care about his talent, or his status among the Dauntless, and that is what I would expect from the abnegation. I'm not sure what to make of that. He says, I have a theory that selflessness and bravery aren't all that different. All your life you've been training to forget yourself, so when you're in danger, it becomes your first instinct. I could belong in abnegation just as easily. Suddenly I feel heavy. A lifetime of training wasn't enough for me. My first instinct is still self-preservation. Yeah, well, I say. I left abnegation because I wasn't selfless enough, no matter how hard I tried to be. That's not entirely true. He smiles at me. That girl who let someone throw knives at her to spare a friend, who hit my dad with a belt to protect me. That selfless girl, that's not you? He's figured out more about me than I have. And even though it seems impossible that he could feel something for me, given all that I'm not, maybe it isn't. I frown at him. You've been paying close attention, haven't you? I like to observe people. Maybe you were cut out for candor, because you're a terrible liar. He puts his hand on the rock next to him, his fingers lining up with mine. I look down at our hands. He has long, narrow fingers, hands made for fine, deft movements. Not Dauntless hands, which should be thick and tough and ready to break things. Fine. He leans his face closer to mine, his eyes focusing on my chin and my lips and my nose. I watched you because I liked you. He says it plainly, boldly, and his eyes flick up to mine. And don't call me okay? It's nice to hear my name again. Just like that. He has finally declared himself, and I don't know how to respond. My cheeks warm, and all I can think to say is, but you're older than I am. Tobias? He smiles at me. Yes, that whopping 2-year gap really is insurmountable, isn't it? I'm not trying to be self-deprecating, I say. I just don't get it. I'm younger. I'm not pretty. He laughs, a deep laugh that sounds like it came from deep inside him, and touches his lips to my temple. Don't pretend, I say breathily. You know I'm not. I'm not ugly, but I am certainly not pretty. Fine. You're not pretty. So? He kisses my cheek. I like how you look. You're deadly smart. You're brave. And even though you found out about Marcus, his voice softens. You aren't giving me that look. Like I'm a kicked puppy or something. Well, I say, you're not. For a second his dark eyes are on mine, and he's quiet. Then he touches my face and leans in close, brushing my lips with his. The river roars, and I feel it spray on my ankles. He grins and presses his mouth to mine. I tense up at first, unsure of myself. So when he pulls away, I'm sure I did something wrong, or badly. But he takes my face in his hands, his fingers strong against my skin, and kisses me again, firmer this time, more certain. I wrap an arm around him, sliding my hand up his neck and into his short hair. For a few minutes we kiss, deep in the chasm, with the roar of water all around us. And when we rise, Hand in hand, I realized that if we had both chosen differently, we might have ended up doing the same thing, in a safer place, in gray clothes instead of black ones. Chapter 27. The next morning, I am silly and light. Every time I push the smile from my face, it fights its way back. Eventually, I stop suppressing it. I let my hair hang loose and abandon my uniform of loose shirts in favor of one that cuts across my shoulders, revealing my tattoos. "What is it with you today?" says Christina on the way to breakfast. Her eyes are still swollen from sleep, and her tangled hair forms a fuzzy halo around her face. "Oh, you know," I say. "Sun shining, birds chirping." She raises an eyebrow at me, as if reminding me that we are in an underground tunnel. "Let the girl be in a good mood," Will says. "You may never see it again." I smack his arm and hurry toward the dining hall. My heart pounds because I know that at some point in the next half hour, I will see Tobias. I sit down in my usual place, next to Uriah, with Will and Christina across from us. The seat on my left stays empty. I wonder if Tobias will sit in it, if he'll grin at me over breakfast, if he'll look at me in that secret, stolen way that I imagine myself looking at him. I grab a piece of toast from the plate in the middle of the table and start to butter it with a little too much enthusiasm. I feel myself acting like a lunatic, but I can't stop. It would be like refusing to breathe. Then he walks in. His hair is shorter, and it looks darker this way, almost black. It's abnegation short, I realize. I smile at him and lift my hand to wave him over, but he sits down next to Zeke without even glancing in my direction, so I let my hand drop. I stare at my toast. It is easy not to smile now. "Something wrong?" asks Uriah through a mouthful of toast. I shake my head and take a bite. What did I expect? Just because we kissed doesn't mean anything changes. Maybe he changed his mind about liking me. Maybe he thinks kissing me was a mistake. "Today's Fear Landscape Day," says Will. "You think we'll get to see our own fear landscapes?" "No," Uriah shakes his head. "You go through one of the instructor's landscapes. My brother told me." "Oh, which instructor?" says Christina, suddenly perking up. "You know, it really isn't fair that you all get insider information we don't," Will says, glaring at Uriah. "Like you wouldn't use an advantage if you had one," retorts Uriah. Christina ignores them. "I hope it's Four's landscape." "Why?" I ask. The question comes out too incredulous. I bite my lip and wish I could take it back. "Looks like someone had a mood swing." She rolls her eyes. "Like you don't want to know what his fears are? He acts so tough that he's probably afraid of marshmallows and really bright sunrises or something. Overcompensating." I shake my head. "It won't be him." "How do you know?" "It's just a prediction." I remember Tobias's father and his fear landscape. He wouldn't let everyone see that. I glance at him. For a second, his eyes shift to mine. His stare is unfeeling. Then he looks away. Lauren, the instructor of the Dauntless-born initiates, stands with her hands on her hips outside the Fear Landscape room. 2 years ago, she says, I was afraid of spiders, suffocation, walls that inch slowly inward and trap you between them, getting thrown out of Dauntless, uncontrollable bleeding, getting run over by a train, my father's death, public humiliation, and kidnapping by men without faces. Everyone stares blankly at her. Most of you will have anywhere from 10 to 15 fears in your fear landscapes. That is the average number, she says. What's the lowest number someone has gotten? Asks Lynn. In recent years, says Lauren, 4. I have not looked at Tobias since we were in the cafeteria, but I can't help but look at him now. He keeps his eyes trained on the floor. I knew that 4 was a low number, low enough to merit a nickname, but I didn't know it was less than half the average. I glare at my feet. He's exceptional. and now he won't even look at me. "You will not find out your number today," says Lauren. "The simulation is set to my fear landscape program, so you will experience my fears instead of your own." I give Christina a pointed look. I was right. We won't go through Four's landscape. For the purposes of this exercise, though, each of you will only face one of my fears, to get a sense of how the simulation works. Lauren points to us at random and assigns us each a fear. I was standing in the back, so I will go close to last. The fear that she assigned me was kidnapping. Because I'm not hooked up to the computer as I wait, I can't watch the simulation, only the person's reaction to it. It is the perfect way to distract myself from my preoccupation with Tobias. Clenching my hands into fists as Will brushes off spiders I can't see, and Uriah presses his hands against walls that are invisible to me, and smirking as Peter turns bright red during whatever he experiences in public humiliation. Then it's my turn. The obstacle won't be comfortable for me, but because I have been able to manipulate every simulation, not just this one, and because I have already gone through Tobias's landscape, I'm not apprehensive as Lauren inserts the needle into my neck. Then the scenery changes, and the kidnapping begins. The ground turns into grass beneath my feet, and hands clamp around my arms, over my mouth. It is too dark to see. I stand next to the chasm. I hear the roar of the water. I scream into the hand that covers my mouth and thrash to free myself. But the arms are too strong. My kidnappers are too strong. The image of myself falling into darkness flashes into my mind, the same image that I now carry with me in my nightmares. I scream again. I scream until my throat hurts, and I squeeze hot tears from my eyes. I knew they would come back for me. I knew they would try again. The first time was not enough. I scream again, not for help, because no one will help me, but because that's what you do when you're about to die and you can't stop it. "Stop," a stern voice says. The hands disappear, and the lights come on. I stand on cement in the fear landscape room. My body shakes, and I drop to my knees, pressing my hands to my face. I just failed. I lost all logic. I lost all sense. Lauren's fear transformed into one of my own. And everyone saw me. Tobias saw me. I hear footsteps. Tobias marches toward me and wrenches me to my feet. What the hell was that, stiff? My breath comes in a hiccup. I didn't... Get yourself together. This is pathetic. Something within me snaps. My tears stop. Heat races through my body, driving the weakness out of me, and I smack him so hard my knuckles burn with the impact. He stares at me, one side of his face bright with blush blood, and I stare back. "Shut up," I say. I yank my arm from his grasp and walk out of the room. Chapter 28. I pull my jacket tight around my shoulders. I haven't been outside in a long time. The sun shines pale against my face, and I watch my breaths form in the air. At least I accomplished one thing. I convinced Peter and his friends that I'm no longer a threat. I just have to make sure that tomorrow, when I go through my own fear landscape, I prove them wrong. Yesterday, failure seemed impossible. Today, I'm not sure. I slide my hands through my hair. The impulse to cry is gone. I braid my hair and tie it with the rubber band around my wrist. I feel more like myself. That is all I need, to remember who I am. And I am someone who does not let inconsequential things like boys and near-death experiences stop her. I laugh, shaking my head. Am I? I hear the train horn. The train tracks loop around the Dauntless compound and then continue farther than I can see. Where do they begin? Where do they end? What is the world like beyond them? I walk toward them. I want to go home, but I can't. Eric warned us not to appear too attached to our parents on visiting day, so visiting home would be betraying the Dauntless, and I can't afford to do that. Eric did not tell us we couldn't visit people in factions, other than the ones we came from, though, and my mother did tell me to visit Caleb. I know I'm not allowed to leave without supervision, but I can't stop myself. I walk faster and faster until I'm sprinting. Pumping my arms, I run alongside the last car until I can grab the handle and swing myself in, wincing as pain darts through my sore body. Once in the car, I lie on my back next to the door and watch the Dauntless compound disappear behind me. I don't want to go back, but choosing to quit, to be factionless, would be the bravest thing I have ever done, and today, I feel like a coward. The air rushes over my body and twists around my fingers. I let my hand trail over the edge of the car so it presses against the wind. I can't go home, but I can find part of it. Caleb has a place in every memory of my childhood. He's a part of my foundation. The train slows as it reaches the heart of the city, and I sit up to watch the smaller buildings grow into larger buildings. The erudite live in large stone buildings that overlook the marsh. I hold the handle and lean out just enough to see where the tracks go. They dip down to street level just before they bend to travel east. I breathe in the smell of wet pavement and marsh air. The train dips and slows, and I jump. My legs shudder with the force of my landing, and I run a few steps to regain my balance. I walk down the middle of the street, heading south toward the marsh. The empty land stretches as far as I can see, a brown plain colliding with the horizon. I turn left. The erudite buildings loom above me, dark and unfamiliar. How will I find Caleb here? The erudite keep records. It's in their nature. They must keep records of their initiates. Someone has access to those records. I just have to find them. I scan the buildings. Logically speaking, the central building should be the most important one. I may as well start there. The faction members are milling around everywhere. Erudite faction norms dictate that a faction member must wear at least one blue article of clothing at a time, because blue causes the body to release calming chemicals, and a calm mind is a clear mind. The color has also come to signify their faction. It seems impossibly bright to me now. I have grown used to dim lighting and dark clothing. I expect to weave through the crowd, dodging elbows and muttering "excuse me," the way I always do. But there is no need. Becoming dauntless has made me noticeable. The crowd parts for me, and their eyes cling to me as I pass. I pull the rubber band from my hair and shake it from its knot before I walk through the front doors. I stand just inside the entrance and tilt my head back. The room is huge, silent, and smells like dust-covered pages. The wood-paneled floor creaks beneath my feet. Bookcases line the walls on either side of me, but they seem to be decorative more than anything, because computers occupy the tables in the center of the room, and no one is reading. They stare at screens with tense eyes, focused. I should have known that the main erudite building would be a library. A portrait on the opposite wall catches my attention. It is twice my height, and 4 times my width, and depicts an attractive woman with watery gray eyes and spectacles. Janine. Heat licks my throat at the sight of her. Because she is Erudite's representative, she is the one who released that report about my father. I have disliked her since my father's dinner table rants began, but now I hate her. Beneath her is a large plaque that reads, "Knowledge leads to prosperity." Prosperity. To me, the word has a negative connotation. Abnegation uses it to describe self-indulgence. How could Caleb have chosen to be one of these people? The things they do, the things they want, it's all wrong. But he probably thinks the same of the Dauntless. I walk up to the desk just beneath Janine's portrait. The young man sitting behind it doesn't look up as he says, "How can I help you?" "I am looking for someone," I say. "His name is Caleb. Do you know where I can find him?" "I'm not permitted to give out personal information," he replies blandly, as he jabs at the screen in front of him. He's my brother. I am not permitted. I slam my palm on the desk in front of him, and he jerks out of his daze, staring at me over his spectacles. Heads turn in my direction. I said. My voice is terse. I am looking for someone. He's an initiate. Can you at least tell me where I can find them? Beatrice? A voice behind me says. I turn, and Caleb stands behind me, a book in hand. His hair has grown out, so it flips at his ears, and he wears a blue t-shirt and a pair of rectangular glasses. Even though he looks different, and I'm not allowed to love him anymore, I run at him as fast as I can and throw my arms around his shoulders. You have a tattoo, he says, his voice muffled. You have glasses, I say. I pull back and narrow my eyes. Your vision is perfect, Caleb. What are you doing? He glances at the tables around us. Come on, let's get out of here. We exit the building and cross the street. I have to jog to keep up with him. Across from Erudite headquarters is what used to be a park. Now we just call it Millennium, and it is a stretch of bare land and several rusted metal sculptures, one an abstract plated mammoth, another shaped like a lima bean that dwarfs me in size. We stop on the concrete around the metal bean, where the erudites sit in small groups with newspapers or books. He takes off his glasses and shoves them in his pocket, then runs a hand through his hair, his eyes skipping over mine nervously, like he's ashamed. Maybe I should be too. I'm tattooed, loose-haired, and wearing tight clothes. But I'm just not. What are you doing here? He says. I wanted to go home, I say, and you were the closest thing I could think of. He presses his lips together. Don't look so pleased to see me, I add. Hey, he says, setting his hands on my shoulders. I'm thrilled to see you, okay? It's just that this isn't allowed. There are rules. I don't care, I say. I don't care, okay? Maybe you should. His voice is gentle. He wears his look of disapproval. If it were me, I wouldn't want to get in trouble with your faction. What's that supposed to mean? I know exactly what it means. He sees my faction as the cruelest of the five, and nothing more. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't have to be so angry with me, he says, tilting his head. What happened to you in there? Nothing. Nothing happened to me. I close my eyes and rub the back of my neck with one hand. Even if I could explain everything to him, I wouldn't want to. I can't even summon the will to think about it. You think... He looks at his shoes. You think you made the right choice? I don't think there was one, I say. How about you? He looks around. People stare at us as they walk past. His eyes skip over their faces. He's still nervous, but maybe it's not because of how he looks, or because of me. Maybe it's them. I grab his arm and pull him under the arch of the metal bean. We walk beneath its hollow underbelly. I see my reflection everywhere, warped by the curve of the walls, broken by patches of rust and grime. What's going on? I say, folding my arms. I didn't notice the dark circles under his eyes before. What's wrong? Caleb presses a palm to the metal wall. In his reflection, his head is small and pressed in on one side, and his arm looks like it is bending backward. My reflection, however, looks small and squat. Something big is happening, Beatrice. Something is wrong. His eyes are wide and glassy. I don't know what it is, but people keep rushing around, talking quietly. And Janine gives speeches about how corrupt abnegation is all the time, almost every day. Do you believe her? No? Maybe, I don't... He shakes his head. I don't know what to believe. Yes, you do, I say sternly. You know who our parents are. You know who our friends are. Susan's dad. You think he's corrupt? How much do I know? How much do they allow me to know? We weren't allowed to ask questions, Beatrice. We weren't allowed to know things. And here? He looks up, and in the flat circle of mirror right above us, I see our tiny figures, the size of fingernails. That, I think, is our true reflection. It is as small as we actually are. He continues. Here. Information is free. It's always available. This isn't candor. There are liars here, Caleb. There are people who are so smart, they know how to manipulate you. Don't you think I would know if I was being manipulated? If they're as smart as you think, then no, I don't think you would know. You have no idea what you're talking about, he says, shaking his head. Yeah, how could I possibly know what a corrupt faction looks like? I'm just training to be dauntless, for God's sake, I say. At least I know what I'm a part of, Caleb. You are choosing to ignore what we've known all our lives. These people are arrogant and greedy, and they will lead you nowhere. His voice hardens. I think I should go, Beatrice. With pleasure, I say. Oh, and not that it will matter to you, but Mom told me to tell you to research the simulation serum. You saw her? He looks hurt. Why didn't she? Because, I say. The erudite don't let the abnegation into their compound anymore. Wasn't that information available to you? I push past him, walking away from the mirror cave and the sculpture, and start down the sidewalk. I should never have left. The dauntless compound sounds like home now. At least there I know exactly where I stand, which is on unstable ground. The crowd on the sidewalk thins, and I look up to see why. Standing a few yards in front of me are two erudite men, with their arms folded. Excuse me, one of them says. You'll have to come with us. One man walks so close behind me that I feel his breath against the back of my head. The other man leads me into the library, and down 3 hallways to an elevator. Beyond the library, the floors change from wood to white tile, and the walls glow like the ceiling of the aptitude test room. The glow bounces off the silver elevator doors, and I squint so I can see. I try to stay calm. I ask myself questions from dauntless training. What do you do if someone attacks you from behind? I envision thrusting my elbow back into a stomach or a groin. I imagine running. I wish I had a gun. These are dauntless thoughts, and they have become mine. What do you do if you're attacked by 2 people at once? I follow the man down an empty, glowing corridor and into an office. The walls are made of glass. I guess I know which faction designed my school. A woman sits behind a metal desk. I stare at her face. The same face dominates the erudite library. It is plastered across every article erudite releases. How long have I hated that face? I don't remember. Sit, Janine says. Her voice sounds familiar, especially when she is irritated. Her liquid gray eyes focus on mine. I'd rather not. Sit, she says again. I have definitely heard her voice before. I heard it in the hallway, talking to Eric, before I got attacked. I heard her mention Divergent. And once before. I heard it. It was your voice in the simulation, I say. The aptitude test, I mean. She is the danger Torian my mother warned me about. The danger of being divergent, sitting right in front of me. Correct. The aptitude test is by far my greatest achievement as a scientist, she replies. I looked up your test results, Beatrice. Apparently there was a problem with your test. It was never recorded, and your results had to be reported manually. Did you know that? No. Did you know that you're one of 2 people ever to get an abnegation result and switch to Dauntless? No, I say, biting back my shock. Tobias and I are the only ones? But his result was genuine, and mine was a lie. So it is really just him. My stomach twinges at the thought of him. Right now I don't care how unique he is. He called me pathetic. What made you choose Dauntless? She asks. What does this have to do with anything? I try to soften my voice, but it doesn't work. Aren't you going to reprimand me for abandoning my faction and seeking out my brother? Faction before blood, right? I pause. Come to think of it, why am I in your office in the first place? Aren't you supposed to be important or something? Maybe that will take her down a few pegs. Her mouth pinches for a second. I will leave the reprimands to the dauntless, she says, leaning back in her chair. I set my hands on the back of the chair I refused to sit in and clenched my fingers. Behind her is a window that overlooks the city. The train takes a lazy turn in the distance. As to the reason for your presence here, a quality of my faction is curiosity, she says, and while perusing your records, I saw that there was another error with another one of your simulations. Again, it failed to be recorded. Did you know that? How did you access my records? Only the Dauntless have access to those. Because Erudite developed the simulations, we have an understanding with the Dauntless, Beatrice. She tilts her head and smiles at me. I am merely concerned for the competence of our technology. If it fails while you are around, I have to ensure that it does not continue to do so. You understand? I understand only one thing. She is lying to me. She doesn't care about the technology. She suspects that something is awry with my test results. Just like the Dauntless leaders, she is sniffing around for the Divergent. And if my mother wants Caleb to research the simulation serum, it is probably because Janine developed it. But what is so threatening about my ability to manipulate the simulations? Why would it matter to the representative of the Erudite of all people? I can't answer either question. But the look she gives me reminds me of the look in the attack dog's eyes in the aptitude test. A vicious, predatory stare. She wants to rip me to pieces. I can't lie down in submission now. I have become an attack dog, too. I feel my pulse in my throat. I don't know how they work, I say. But the liquid I was injected with made me sick to my stomach. Maybe my simulation administrator was distracted because he was worried I would throw up, and he forgot to record it. I got sick after the aptitude test, too. Do you habitually have a sensitive stomach, Beatrice? Her voice is like a razor's edge. She taps her trimmed fingernails against the glass desk. Ever since I was young, I reply as smoothly as I can. I release the chair back and sidestep it to sit down. I can't seem tense, even though I feel like my insides are writhing within me. You have been extremely successful with the simulations, she says. To what do you attribute the ease with which you complete them? I am brave, I say, staring into her eyes. The other factions see the Dauntless a certain way. Brash, aggressive, impulsive, cocky. I should be what she expects. I smirk at her. I'm the best initiate they've got. I lean forward, balancing my elbows on my knees. I will have to go further with this to make it convincing. You want to know why I chose Dauntless? I ask. It's because I was bored. Further. Lies require commitment. I was tired of being a wussy little do-gooder, and I wanted out. So you don't miss your parents? She asks delicately. Do I miss getting scolded for looking in the mirror? Do I miss being told to shut up at the dinner table? I shake my head. No, I don't miss them. They're not my family anymore. The lie burns my throat on the way out. Or maybe that's the tears I'm fighting. I picture my mother standing behind me with a comb and a pair of scissors, faintly smiling as she trims my hair. And I want to scream rather than insult her like this. Can I take that to mean? Janine purses her lips and pauses for a few seconds before finishing. That you agree with the reports that have been released about the political leaders of this city? The reports that label my family as corrupt, power-hungry, moralizing dictators? The reports that carry subtle threats and hint at revolution? They make me sick to my stomach. Knowing that she is the one who released them makes me want to strangle her. I smile. Wholeheartedly, I say. One of Janine's lackeys, a man in a blue-collared shirt and sunglasses, drives me back to the Dauntless compound in a sleek silver car, the likes of which I have never seen before. The engine is almost silent. When I ask the man about it, he tells me it's solar-powered and launches into a lengthy explanation of how the panels on the roof convert sunlight into energy. I stop listening after 60 seconds and stare out the window. I don't know what they'll do to me when I get back. I suspect it will be bad. I imagine my feet dangling over the chasm and bite my lip. When the driver pulls up to the glass building above the Dauntless compound, Eric is waiting for me by the door. He takes my arm and leads me into the building without thanking the driver. Eric's fingers squeeze so hard I know I'll have bruises. He stands between me and the door that leads inside. He starts to crack his knuckles. Other than that, he is completely still. I shudder involuntarily. The faint pop of his knuckle cracking is all I hear apart from my own breaths, which grow faster by the second. When he is finished, Eric laces his fingers together in front of him. "Welcome back, Triss." "Eric." He walks toward me, carefully placing one foot in front of the other. "What?" His first word is quiet. "Exactly," he adds, louder this time, "were you thinking?" He is so close I can see the holes his metal piercings fit into. "I don't know." "I'm tempted to call you a traitor, Triss," he says. "Have you never heard the phrase faction before blood?" I have seen Eric do terrible things. I have heard him say terrible things, but I have never seen him like this. He is not a maniac anymore. He is perfectly controlled, perfectly poised, careful, and quiet. For the first time, I recognize Eric for what he is, an erudite disguised as a Dauntless, a genius as well as a sadist, a hunter of the Divergent. I want to run. "Were you unsatisfied with the life you have found here? Do you perhaps regret your choice?" Both of Eric's metal-ridden eyebrows lift, forcing creases into his forehead. "I would like to hear an explanation for why you betrayed Dauntless, yourself, and me." He taps his chest. "By venturing into another faction's headquarters." I take a deep breath. He would kill me if he knew what I was. I can feel it. His hands curl into fists. I'm alone here. If something happens to me, no one will know, and no one will see it. "If you cannot explain," he says softly, "I may be forced to reconsider your rank. Or, because you seem to be so attached to your previous faction, perhaps I will be forced to reconsider your friends' ranks. Perhaps the little abnegation girl inside of you would take that more seriously." My first thought is that he couldn't do that. It wouldn't be fair. My second thought is that of course he would. He would not hesitate to do it for a second. And he is right. The thought that my reckless behavior could force someone else out of a faction makes my chest ache from fear. I try again. But it is hard to breathe. And then the door opens. Tobias walks in. "What are you doing?" he asks Eric. "Leave the room," Eric says, his voice louder and not as monotone. He sounds more like the Eric I am familiar with. His expression, too, changes, becomes more mobile and animated. I stare, amazed that he can turn it on and off so easily, and wonder what the strategy behind it is. "No," Tobias says. "She's just a foolish girl. There's no need to drag her here and interrogate her." "Just a foolish girl?" Eric snorts. "If she was just a foolish girl, she wouldn't be ranked first now, would she?" Tobias pinches the bridge of his nose and looks at me through the spaces between his fingers. He is trying to tell me something. I think quickly. What advice has Ford given me recently? The only thing I can think of is pretend some vulnerability. It's worked for me before. I was just embarrassed and didn't know what to do. I put my hands in my pockets and look at the ground. Then I pinch my legs so hard that tears well up in my eyes, and I look up at Eric, sniffing. I tried to, and... I shake my head. You tried to what? Asks Eric. Kiss me, says Tobias. And I rejected her, and she went running off like a 5-year-old. There's really nothing to blame her for but stupidity. We both wait. Eric looks from me to Tobias and laughs, too loudly and for too long. The sound is menacing and grates against me like sandpaper. Isn't he a little too old for you, Tris? He says, smiling again. I wipe my cheek like I'm wiping a tear. Can I go now? Fine, Eric says. But you are not allowed to leave the compound without supervision again, you hear me? He turns toward Tobias. And you had better make sure none of the transfers leave this compound again, and that none of the others try to kiss you. Tobias rolls his eyes. Fine. I leave the room and walk outside again, shaking my hands to get rid of the jitters. I sit down on the pavement and wrap my arms around my knees. I don't know how long I sit there, my head down and my eyes closed, before the door opens again. It might have been 20 minutes, and it might have been an hour. Tobias walks toward me. I stand and cross my arms, waiting for the scolding to start. I slapped him, and then got myself into trouble with the Dauntless. There has to be scolding. What? I say. Are you all right? A crease appears between his eyebrows, and he touches my cheek gently. I bat his hand away. Well, I say, first I got reamed out in front of everyone, and then I had to chat with the woman who's trying to destroy my old faction, and then Eric almost tossed my friends out of the Dauntless, so yeah, it's shaping up to be a pretty great day for. He shakes his head and looks at the dilapidated building to his right, which is made of brick, and barely resembles the sleek glass spire behind me. It must be ancient. No one builds with brick anymore. Why do you care anyway? I say. You can be either cruel instructor or concerned boyfriend. I tense up at the word boyfriend. I didn't mean to use it so flippantly, but it's too late now. You can't play both parts at the same time. I'm not cruel. He scowls at me. I was protecting you this morning. How do you think Peter and his idiot friends would have reacted if they discovered that you and I were... He sighs. You would never win. They would always call your ranking a result of my favoritism, rather than your skill. I open my mouth to object, but I can't. A few smart remarks come to mind, but I dismiss them. He's right. My cheeks warm and I cool them with my hands. You didn't have to insult me to prove something to them, I say finally. And you didn't have to run off to your brother just because I hurt you, he says. He rubs at the back of his neck. Besides, it worked, didn't it? At my expense. I didn't think it would affect you this way. Then he looks down and shrugs. Sometimes I forget that I can hurt you, that you are capable of being hurt. I slide my hands into my pockets and rock back on my heels. A strange feeling goes through me, a sweet, aching weakness. He did what he did because he believed in my strength. At home it was Caleb who was strong, because he could forget himself, because all the characteristics my parents valued came naturally to him. No one has ever been so convinced of my strength. I stand on my tiptoes, lift my head, and kiss him. Only our lips touch. You're brilliant. You know that? I shake my head. You always know exactly what to do. Only because I've been thinking about this for a long time, he says, kissing me briefly. How I would handle it if you and I... He pulls back and smiles. Did I hear you call me your boyfriend, Tris? Not exactly, I shrug. Why? Do you want me to? He slips his hands over my neck and presses his thumbs under my chin, tilting my head back so his forehead meets mine. For a moment he stands there, his eyes closed, breathing my air. I feel the pulse in his fingertips. I feel the quickness of his breath. He seems nervous. Yes, he finally says. Then his smile fades. You think we convinced him you're just a silly girl? I hope so, I say. Sometimes it helps to be small. I'm not sure I convinced the erudite, though. The corners of his mouth tug down, and he gives me a grave look. There's something I need to tell you. What is it? Not now. He glances around. Meet me back here at 11:30. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I nod, and he turns away, leaving just as quickly as he came. Where have you been all day? Christina asks when I walk back into the dormitory. The room is empty. Everyone else must be at dinner. I looked for you outside, but I couldn't find you. Is everything okay? Did you get in trouble for hitting 4? I shake my head. The thought of telling her the truth about where I was makes me feel exhausted. How can I explain the impulse to hop on a train and visit my brother? Or the eerie calm in Eric's voice as he questioned me? Or the reason that I exploded and hit Tobias to begin with? I just had to get away. I walked around for a long time, I say. And no, I'm not in trouble. He yelled at me. I apologized. That's it. As I speak, I'm careful to keep my eyes steady on hers, and my hands still at my sides. Good, she says, because I have something to tell you. She looks over my head at the door, and then stands on her tiptoes to see all the bunks, checking if they're empty, probably. Then she sets her hands on my shoulders. Can you be a girl for a few seconds? I'm always a girl. I frown. You know what I mean. Like a silly, annoying girl. I twirl my hair around my finger. 'Kay. She grins so wide I can see her back row of teeth. Will kissed me. What? I demand. When? How? What happened? You can be a girl. She straightens, taking her hands from my shoulders. Well, right after your little episode, we ate lunch, and then we walked around near the train tracks. We were just talking about... I don't even remember what we were talking about. And then he just stopped and leaned in and kissed me. Did you know that he liked you? I say. I mean, like that? No, she laughs. The best part was, that was it. We just kept walking and talking like nothing happened. Well, until I kissed him. How long have you known you liked him? I don't know. I guess I didn't. But then little things. How he put his arm around me at the funeral. How he opens doors for me like I'm a girl, instead of someone who could beat the crap out of him. I laugh. Suddenly I want to tell her about Tobias, and everything that has happened between us. But the same reasons Tobias gave for pretending we aren't together hold me back. I don't want her to think that my rank has anything to do with my relationship with him. So I just say, I'm happy for you. Thanks, she says. I'm happy too. And I thought it would be a while before I could feel that way. She sits down on the edge of my bed and looks around the dormitory. Some of the initiates have already packed their things. Soon we'll move into apartments on the other side of the compound. Those with government jobs will move to the glass building above the pit. I won't have to worry about Peter attacking me in my sleep. I won't have to look at Al's empty bed. I can't believe it's almost over, she says. It's like we just got here. But it's also like I haven't seen home in forever. You miss it? I lean into the bed frame. Yeah, she shrugs. Some things are the same, though. I mean, everyone at home is just as loud as everyone here, so that's good. But it's easier there. You always know where you stand with everyone, because they tell you. There's no manipulation. I nod. Abnegation prepared me for that aspect of Dauntless life. The abnegation aren't manipulative, but they aren't forthright either. I don't think I could have made it through candor initiation, though. She shakes her head. There, instead of simulations, you get lie detector tests. All day, every day. And the final test? She wrinkles her nose. They give you the stuff they call truth serum and sit you in front of everyone and ask you a load of really personal questions. The theory is that if you spill all your secrets, you'll have no desire to lie about anything, ever again. Like the worst about you is already in the open, so why not just be honest? I don't know when I accumulated so many secrets. Being divergent, fears, how I really feel about my friends, my family, Al, Tobias. Candor initiation would reach things that even the simulations can't touch. It would wreck me. Sounds awful, I say. I always knew I couldn't be candor. I mean, I try to be honest, but some things you just don't want people to know. Plus, I like to be in control of my own mind. Don't we all? Anyway, she says. She opens the cabinet to the left of our bunk beds. When she pulls the door open, a moth flutters out, its white wings carrying it toward her face. Christina shrieks so loud I almost jump out of my skin and slaps at her cheeks. "Get it off, get it off, get it off, get it off!" she screams. The moth flutters away. "It's gone," I say. Then I laugh. "You're afraid of moths? They're disgusting. Those papery wings and their stupid bug bodies." She shudders. I keep laughing. I laugh so hard I have to sit down and hold my stomach. "It's not funny," she snaps. "Well, okay, maybe it is. A little." When I find Tobias late that night, he doesn't say anything. He just grabs my hand and pulls me toward the train tracks. He draws himself into a train car as it passes with bewildering ease, and pulls me in after him. I fall against him, my cheek against his chest. His fingers slide down my arms, and he holds me by the elbows as the car bumps along the steel rails. I watch the glass building above the Dauntless compound shrink behind us. "What is it you need to tell me?" I shout over the cry of the wind. "Not yet," he says. He sinks to the floor and pulls me down with him. So he's sitting with his back against the wall, and I'm facing him, my legs trailing to the side on the dusty floor. The wind pushes strands of my hair loose and tosses them over my face. He presses his palms to my face, his index fingers sliding behind my ears, and pulls my mouth to his. I hear the screech of the rails as the train slows, which means we must be nearing the middle of the city. The air is cold, but his lips are warm, and so are his hands. He tilts his head and kisses the skin just beneath my jaw. I'm glad the air is so loud he can't hear me sigh. The train car wobbles, throwing off my balance, and I put my hand down to steady myself. A split second later, I realize that my hand is on his hip. The bone presses into my palm. I should move it, but I don't want to. He told me once to be brave, and though I have stood still, while knives spun toward my face and jumped off a roof, I never thought I would need bravery in the small moments of my life. I do. I shift, swinging a leg over him, so I sit on top of him, and with my heartbeat in my throat, I kiss him. He sits up straighter, and I feel his hands on my shoulders. His fingers slip down my spine, and a shiver follows them down to the small of my back. He unzips my jacket a few inches, and I press my hands to my legs to stop them from shaking. I should not be nervous. This is Tobias. Cold air slips across my bare skin. He pulls away and looks carefully at the tattoos just above my collarbone. His fingers brush over them, and he smiles. "Birds," he says. "Are they crows?" I keep forgetting to ask. I try to return his smile. "Ravens, one for each member of my family," I say. "You like them?" He doesn't answer. He tugs me closer, pressing his lips to each bird in turn. I close my eyes. His touch is light, sensitive. A heavy, warm feeling, like spilling honey, fills my body, slowing my thoughts. He touches my cheek. I hate to say this, he says, but we have to get up now. I nod and open my eyes. We both stand, and he tugs me with him to the open door of the train car. The wind is not as strong now that the train has slowed. It's past midnight, so all the street lights are dark, and the buildings look like mammoths as they rise from the darkness and then sink into it again. Tobias lifts a hand and points at a cluster of buildings, so far away they are the size of a fingernail. They are the only bright spot in the dark sea around us. Erudite headquarters again. Apparently the city ordinances don't mean anything to them, he says, because their lights will be on all night. No one else has noticed? I say, frowning. I'm sure they have, but they haven't done anything to stop it. It may be because they don't want to cause a problem over something so small. Tobias shrugs, but the tension in his features worries me. But it made me wonder what the erudite are doing that requires night light. He turns toward me, leaning against the wall. 2 things you should know about me. The first is that I'm deeply suspicious of people in general, he says. It is my nature to expect the worst of them. And the second is that I am unexpectedly good with computers. I nod. He said his other job was working with computers, but I still have trouble picturing him sitting in front of a screen all day. A few weeks ago, before training started, I was at work and I found a way into the Dauntless secure files. Apparently, we are not as skilled as erudite are at security, he says, and what I discovered was what looked like war plans. Thinly veiled commands, supply lists, maps, things like that. And those files were sent by erudite. War? I brushed my hair away from my face. Listening to my father insult erudite all my life has made me wary of them, and my experiences in the Dauntless compound make me wary of authority and human beings in general. So I'm not shocked to hear that a faction could be planning a war. And what Caleb said earlier. Something big is happening, Beatrice. I look up at Tobias. War and abnegation? He takes my hands, lacing his fingers with mine, and says, the faction that controls the government. Yes. My stomach sinks. All those reports are supposed to stir up dissension against abnegation, he says, his eyes focused on the city beyond the train car. Evidently, the erudite now want to speed up the process. I have no idea what to do about it, or what could even be done. But, I say, why would erudite team up with Dauntless? And then something occurs to me, something that hits me in the gut and gnaws at my insides. Erudite doesn't have weapons, and they don't know how to fight. But the Dauntless do. I stare wide-eyed at Tobias. They're going to use us, I say. I wonder, he says, how they plan to get us to fight. I told Caleb that erudite knew how to manipulate people. They could coerce some of us into fighting with misinformation, or by appealing to greed, any number of ways. But the erudite are as meticulous as they are manipulative, so they wouldn't leave it up to chance. They would need to make sure that all their weaknesses are shored up. But how? The wind blows my hair across my face, cutting my vision into strips, and I leave it there. I don't know, I say.